worry, vaccines are perfectly safe, according to me. You might notice a little prick. Hello and welcome back to hell. I'm just vaccinating my profiteroles, immunizing them against... Right, let's talk about the study. I'm calling it the study because its real title was Ileal Lymphoid Nodular Hyperplasia, Nonspecific Colitis, and Pervasive Developmental Disorder in Children, which is a bit of a tongue twister. I had to do a not insignificant amount of Googling to find out whether it's pronounced ileal or ileal.
He didn't just know all of it immediately?
No, why I bothered. If I got it wrong, it's not like you would have noticed. The paper's lead author is Dr. Andrew Wakefield. I'm sorry, there's a mistake in my script. The paper's lead author is disgraced ex-Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Wakefield is seen by many as the founder of the modern anti-vaccine movement, since he was behind the paper that started the whole thing. Let's keep an eye on that. Oh, fuck it. The smoke machine occasionally goes off on its own for no reason. I can't be bothered to get up. The paper's supposed purpose was to investigate a connection between bowel disorders and developmental issues in children, in particular targeting signs of autism. So first off, what's a colitis? Right, hold on. Okay, colitis is inflammation of the colon, one of the main symptoms of bowel diseases like Crohn's disease.
Oh, and he goes through and he breaks down the terms and explains it all. Okay, good job. You should do this for stuff that you read, instead of just like reading it and having your eyes glaze over.
For example,
colitis.
By the way, we're going to use words like bowel, colon, and intestine interchangeably in this video. Don't let it confuse you, they're mostly the same thing. If you're a doctor, pretend you didn't hear that. The paper says non-specific colitis because it's not looking for specific kinds of inflammation. It's looking at whatever inflammation these children happen to have and seeing how they compare, because maybe they're all linked, and maybe they're even linked to the autism. According to Wakefield, he just happened to notice a lot of kids with both autism and bowel disorders, and he launched the study to investigate a possible link. But what does all that have to do with vaccines? I mean, surely it must have found something for it to have caused all this controversy. Well, allow me to list the paper's highly scientific findings. Some of the parents of the children in the study think they remember the autism symptoms starting after the MMR vaccine. No, really, that's it.
Findings. Onset of behavioral symptoms was associated by parents with measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination.
For literally decades, right, I've been hearing about this paper, and I've assumed that there must have been something there, like something to at least explore or discuss or debunk. Everyone lost their fucking minds over it, so surely there's something, and I finally go and read it, and it's just a bunch of fucking parents' opinions. There's just nothing there. I can't fucking believe this.
I would say that I think that parental reporting and tracking is fairly common, at least for like small studies on stuff. Like you kind of have to rely on parents like knowing what happened with their kids. Like that's pretty ordinary, I think, at least on smaller studies. Now on really big ones, you might start tracking kids with researchers and everything, but this is when you get a lot of funding because you've got a good idea that seems to be picking up steam or whatever.
Seriously, the disconnect between the attempts at real science.
But again, there's nothing, I just want to be careful, okay? Because people will do this thing where they'll be like, oh, small sample size, horrible study. No, every single big study you've ever in your life started with some small pilot study of like n equals 9, okay? The thing you just have to be careful of is your extrapolations are incredibly limited in the beginning here. You have to be very careful. You can't extrapolate this. These are just always causes for further investigation. That's how it works. It's fine. It's not that it's not real science. It's not bad science. You just have to be careful with how much you extrapolate, which it seems like they kind of do in this, at least in the study itself. But we'll get more into, I guess, the background and everything on it. But
science and the stuff the parents think they remember is like so jarring. Like next to colonoscopies and biopsies and graphs of urinary excretion.
Yeah, but Destiny, the small sample study is still not great. You still want the larger study to start making the big claims. Yeah, but there's no big claim made in this study, I don't believe. It doesn't look like there's a big claim made here. Now, the author might, but we haven't gotten to that, the external thing yet.
Think they remember is like so jarring. Like next to colonoscopies and biopsies and graphs of urinary excretions, you'll suddenly get sentences like,
He received a dose of measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the day after which his mother described a striking deterioration in his behavior that she did link with the immunization.
A note from your mother isn't science, it's how you get out of PE. I'm sorry, coach, I didn't really have polio. Maybe some home decorating will relax me. I love this poster because I'm smart, and now all my guests will know I'm smart. I have tons of guests, I'm a party animal, I have a charisma of at least 6. I wonder why the economy...
Isn't the fact that there isn't a control group makes the study basically useless? No, I don't even know if you would have a control group for a sample size this small. Like if you're studying 4 kids against a control of 4, I don't know with that few children, like, what is it, like central limit theorem or whatever, like, I don't even think you could have enough to have a high confidence interval based, like, no, this is just basically, I don't want to call it a case study. I don't know how you would, I don't know what you call these exactly, but it's just a small group study. You don't need, can you consider this a case study if it's like 10 kids? Like, yeah, it's like an observational. You can't even do a control. There's not enough, there's not enough data. But it's okay. This is okay for a small study. It's okay to do this.
Economist interviewed ContraPoints and not me. There, perfect. Does that look all right to you? No, Rachel, don't wave the camera. That's not how people communicate. Page 3 of the study provides a table listing each child's behavioral diagnosis, largely autism, and also what their parents identified as their exposure, the thing which, in their opinion, caused the diagnosis.
Sure.
Of course, most of them blame the vaccine. Now, while a bunch of opinions are about as useful in science as a bath made of teeth, we might as well explore how someone might end up having that opinion.
Okay, again, I just want to fucking clarify. Dude, all of this shit is going to be self-reported, reported by parents. That's how every psychological study, all of this shit, like when you diagnose these things, even your DSM-5 criteria are going to be on patient self-reporting, right? There's not going to be somebody that follows you around all day with a clipboard saying like, okay, does he really have depression? Let's see. Doesn't wake up in the morning, check. Seems like, hey, how you feeling right now? Well, even that's a self-report, right? Like, hey, you look like shit today. Okay. Okay, well, lack of aggression, check, lack of whatever. Like, a lot of it is done with self-reporting, okay? Just to, okay.
It's actually really common.
Yeah, but you wouldn't use parent feedback in such a small group. You can diagnose each kid, no? No, you have to use parent feedback for developmental stuff. The doctors don't know. They don't know if the kid is regressed in development or not. But like, these are things that you should also be aware of too. Like parents can make bad connections or parents can fuck up as well. But no, you kind of have to rely on parental reporting for when the kids are like 2 years old, right?
We might as well explore how someone might end up having that opinion. It's actually really common for us to... Actually, hey, Angie?
Yeah?
Could you draw me as a ferret, please?
Okay. Well, why?
I will not explain why. It's actually really common for us to assume two things that happen to us around the same time must be caused by one another. That's how we, as ape people whose fur fell off one day, think about things with our tiny, godless little monkey brains. If you ate some strange new berries and got sick that day, you're basically programmed to connect the two for the sake of your own survival. This is the 1 in 10 times that evolutionary psychology is real. The rest are fake, Malcolm, but these correlations we make in our heads between events aren't necessarily true. It might not have been the berries. It could have been all the budget energy drinks you import from Thailand. You know what? Maybe you can have too much carabao. Another big problem here is how humans relate to spans of time. Just like how under quarantine you might not even notice 4 months passing because
everybody
nothing
keeps
happens.
You guys all keep bringing up external stuff about the parents were lying or people are citing the study. I agree that that's problems. Sorry, I was going to hear. That's problematic. That's not good. If that's the case, that's bad. But there's just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. People see like a bad thing happening and they want to throw out the entire underlying thing. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. Self-reporting, parents reporting on children, conditions, everything. This is all like fairly ordinary stuff that you're going to see in high quality case studies and high quality medical research. Now in huge studies, the tracking is going to be more normalized and the tracking is going to be more. It's going to be more normalized. But in a very small case series or case studies like this is going to be kind of.
If someone coughs on you today and later in the evening you start to feel a bit sick, a lot of people might remember being coughed on and assume that's how they got it. But illnesses can take days or weeks to incubate. Maybe you don't remember the time you got coughed on 2 weeks ago by the guy who was delivering the last crate of energy drinks. Oh, Carabao, why is it so hard to quit you? Win football tickets? I can't wait to be in a crowd of people again. The table claims some of the parents notice the symptoms a few weeks, days, or even hours after getting the vaccine. But I do have to wonder how easy it is for someone to recall something as complex as the exact date of the onset of a child's behavioral symptoms. A BBC documentary from back in the day interviewed a parent and they said on camera that their son became autistic overnight after the vaccine.
What happened to your son?
Overnight. He had the fever, the high temperature. Literally overnight. He was never the same again.
Even the interviewer was like, literally? Literally overnight? Like, are you sure? The signs of autism appear gradually and grow over time. When parents first take notice, there could easily be other signs they missed. Another better documentary about all this we'll get to later actually found parents who realized they'd made this exact mistake.
Stacey and Damien no longer believe that their daughter's autism was caused by MMR. After researching and remembering Rebecca as a baby, they realized that she had already shown symptoms before she was vaccinated.
Parents don't necessarily notice the symptoms until they're fairly obvious, but that doesn't mean the symptoms weren't there or their child wasn't autistic beforehand. I'm bringing this up because it's important to make the distinction that whenever someone describes something like their child's first symptom, what they are really describing is the first symptom they personally noticed. Here's a timeline of the first 2 years of a child's development. Statistically, the average age that symptoms of autism become noticeable to parents is around 12 to 18 months. Children in the UK receive a dose of the MMR vaccine from between 12 to 15 months. Isn't it possible that these parents are blaming a coincidental event? You can even see evidence that this happens in the paper, because some of the other parents blame other totally coincidental events. One of them blames their child's autism on an ear infection they got a week before they first noticed the symptoms. Do ear infections cause autism now? No. No, of course not. But if it was the only other thing that you remembered happening to your child, you can see how someone might end up assuming they're related. Before this study was released, there were a few very small clusters of parents that thought vaccines caused autism or other illnesses. JABS, the Justice, Awareness and Basic Support Group, wow, they really worked hard to make their name say JABS, had been around for a few years beforehand. The founder of JABS, Jackie Fletcher, asserts to this day that her son suddenly became severely autistic 10 days after his MMR vaccination, and has frequently tried to sue the government and MMR manufacturers for money over it. It's important to recognize that statistically, even if vaccines are perfectly safe, you're going to get a small amount of parents like her who are convinced that vaccines are harmful because they got one right right before something like this happened. Before there was a scientific paper and thousands of news pieces telling them to, there really weren't that many parents of autistic children who blamed the vaccine. According to a pro-jabs piece made in May 2002 when the scare was happening, there were thousands of members, but before all that there were only about 30 sets of parents at best. And speaking of groups being too small to be statistically meaningful, another big problem, or to put it another way, a small problem, is sample size. Please hold your applause until the end. On its own, a study of a small sample size, like 12 children, can't prove anything about the rest of a population. I've made this point about people drawing sweeping conclusions from small studies before. However, it's important to understand sample size criticisms in the proper context. Studies on small groups happen all the time in science, for a good reason. They're often called pilot studies, and they're useful for figuring out how a bigger study should work in preparation for the real thing, or for checking to see if there's something worth looking into in the first place. A fraction of parents of the tens of millions of children who've had this vaccine saying they think there might be a connection is, at best, grounds to do a better study on a bigger group of children to find out if this connection actually exists.
True, which they did do, and it seems like there was no association, or they haven't found any association so far with vaccines and autism. Yes.
Exists. We're going to come back to this later because someone had the opportunity to do one of those, and what they did with that opportunity is very interesting. That was an awful take. Let me do that again. In summary, the science is really bad. It's bonkers. The study even admits it doesn't prove anything at the end.
We did not prove an association between measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and the syndrome described.
The next sentence is hilarious.
Virological studies are underway that may help to resolve this issue.
Although that's good. You want these studies published. We want to see, this is one of the, I hear it said, I'm not a publisher of scientific literature myself, but I hear it stated a lot that one of the problems with research is we don't do disconfirming research enough because it's not very sexy. Nobody wants to do a study and then publish it saying they found nothing, right? So this is fine. If they did this, even the small case series or whatever, and they didn't find anything, having them say that, that's good. That's a good thing. We want
Science
that.
is really bad.
That doesn't necessarily make it bad.
The study even admits it doesn't prove anything at the end.
We did not prove an association between measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and the syndrome described.
The next sentence is hilarious.
Virological studies are underway that may help to resolve this issue.
The issue being that they don't have any proof. In science, it's expected to admit the limitations of your study. Papers and medical journals have high standards for what constitutes solid proof. However, Wakefield is using this as a shield. By hiding behind the defense that he hasn't claimed to prove anything, he can then speculate about a lot of things he hasn't proved. For example, these children appear to share similar, though non-specific, bowel problems. I say appeared because, well, we'll come back to that, but Wakefield takes this vague collection of similar things and concludes with the theory that could make his career, that the vaccine may cause autism and it happens through the bowels.
We have identified a chronic enterocolitis in children that may be related to neuropsychiatric dysfunction. In most cases, onset of symptoms was after measles, mumps, and rubella immunization. Further investigations are needed to examine the syndrome and its possible relation to this vaccine. In literally the final sentences of the paper, Wakefield invents a new disease that combines bowel disorders and autism, and then speculates that MMR vaccination might cause the disease he just made up. This is
I mean, like, it is kind of a speculation, but I mean, like, they said as much. Like, they've identified, some inflammation in children, and it might be related to the autistic stuff. It seems to happen around the MMR vaccine time, so maybe they're linked. It feels like this feels like a fairly measured. Now, would it be more responsible maybe to put more cautionary words in here? They do this in research. They will have more cautionary words at the end sometimes, so they feel like people might interpret things in a poor way. Maybe, sure, but just on the paper itself, it doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world.
Absolutely buck wild, as some would put it. It's like medical fan fiction. Sure, he admitted it just maybe and said we need more research to prove anything, but now his made-up disease is in a published scientific paper in one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. Journalists with little to no scientific knowledge go on to report on this paper as if it's discovering this new disease.
Doctors at the Royal Free Hospital believe they may have discovered a link between the combination vaccine and a bowel disease that can progress to autism.
What are you talking about? He admitted he didn't prove anything and then
Wait, like, that was not well stated. Wait, hold on.
Journalists with little to no scientific knowledge go on to report on this paper as if it's discovering this new disease.
Doctors at the Royal Free Hospital believe they may have discovered a link between the combination vaccine and a bowel disease that can progress to autism.
Like, the paper itself said that they haven't even fully confirmed the link between the bowel stuff and autism. And so this reporting on that was going way further than the paper itself.
Talking about? He admitted he didn't prove anything and then wildly speculated at the end. No! There is one last really weird thing about this paper we haven't mentioned yet.
Okay.
Which most people don't seem to mention, which I find a little bit weird and indicates that no one has actually read it. Towards the end of the paper, Wakefield tries to find other papers that kind of support his findings, so he really has to scrape the bottom of the barrel.
Fudenberg noted that for 15 of 20 autistic children, the first symptoms developed within a week of vaccination.
Wow! That's a really interesting thing to... Isn't it? We should probably actually go read Fudenberg's paper and see what it has to say for itself.
I didn't look up all the underlying papers, but it looked like in the other research he was citing stuff that seemed to correlate the diseases or the vaccine stuff of the same diseases with this link between autism and your, I guess he's, what's the word I'm looking for? Something pathology. There's some fancier word I'm looking for there, but because he does this, Asperger's is linked between celiac disease and behavioral psychoses. And then where does he do all these things? Oh, down here. Because he doesn't just call out the vaccines here. He even calls the diseases themselves as causing autism as well, right? Disintegrative psychosis is recognized as a sequel to, so this disintegrative psychosis sounds like something that's basically like hardcore autism, is a sequel to measles encephalitis, although in most cases, no causes are identified. Viral encephalitis can give rise to autistic disorders, particularly when it occurs early in life. Rubella virus is associated with autism, and the combined MMR vaccine, rather than the monovalent measles vaccine, has also been implicated. And then he's like citing these things. I don't know if the underlying research is good or not. That's what he's citing.
Fudenberg's 1996 paper cited here is from...
It's celiac? Oh, wait, is that celiacs? Is it normally written like that? Okay.
Biotherapy, a fringe
Hey, Destiny, who makes the vaccines? Your mom does.
journal for quacks that actually went out of business 2 years later. The paper is a pilot study on the effects of a substance called dialysable lymphocyte extract on children with autism. In addition to alleging that several of the children had become autistic within a week of getting vaccinated, are you ready for this? Fudenberg claimed that this extract he'd created could cure autism.
Of the 22 with classic autism, 10 became normal, in that they were mainstreamed in school and clinical characteristics were fully normalized.
Became normal! Holy shit! And you want to know something funny? You want to know something funny? At the time that the study was published, Fudenberg didn't have a medical license. It was revoked the year before because he was caught stealing controlled substances from his job for personal use.
Hell yeah, based.
The South Carolina Medical Board found him guilty of engaging in dishonorable, unethical, or unprofessional conduct. He admitted he'd done it in the hearing too. So he got caught stealing drugs, admitted it, got fired, lost all credibility, probably wasn't even allowed within 100 yards of a stethoscope, and then a year later, he cured autism. According to him, and you know he's trustworthy.
Well, just when the study was published, there can be like a latency period because you submit it to a journal and then they review it and then they publish it. So it could be that it was all done before he had his shit revoked. Now he was probably still getting high while doing that, but hey, based.
Because he admitted to stealing all those medical supplies. What I'm trying to say here is ex-Dr. Hugh Fudenberg's paper is one of the most obviously bullshit things I've ever read. And Wakefield had to cite it to create a precedent for his findings. This is the best he could get. You can see why it's a bit weird no one brings this up, right? In scientific circles, everyone who read Wakefield's paper, or worse, bothered to check the sources it cited, had, you know, a few minor concerns. It was so concerning that The Lancet published in the same issue a response to the paper. Vaccine adverse events, causal or coincidental. It points out numerous problems, some of which we've discussed here already, and has some words to say about fear-mongering about vaccines like this.
Vaccine safety concerns such as that reported by Wakefield and colleagues may snowball into societal tragedies when the media and the public confuse association with causality and shun immunization.
True.
This would be tragic because passion would then conquer reason and the facts again in the UK.
This commentary would probably have seemed darkly apocalyptic at the time, but in retrospect, it was a shockingly accurate prediction.
Okay, fuck. Am I gonna watch all this? We'll see how much we watch this. Sorry. So Brian Deere was the journalist apparently that did the research into this study and then published the expose in the some bullshit book. Not book, paper. Bullshit because it's a British paper. Was it the British Times or something? What was it called? The Sunday Times.
It started with fear. Fear spread by a doctor. Fear of a vaccine given routinely to children, brought willingly by their parents for protection. Tonight, Dispatches reveals what parents were never told. How a major London teaching hospital and Dr. Andrew Wakefield launched a health scare which questioned the safety of the 3-in-1 MMR vaccine.
My opinion is that the MMR should be suspended in favour of the single vaccines.
How they planned
That's a crazy statement. Unless there's a ton more research this guy did. That's the Andrew Wakefield guy.
the rival vaccine and products that could have made their fortune.
Not good.
And how when Dr. Wakefield warned that MMR might lead to autism, his own laboratory had carried out tests on children that dramatically contradicted his claims. But when push comes to shove, Dr. Andrew Wakefield is careful what he does and doesn't say.
Dr. Wakefield, I'm sorry to interrupt. Brian Deere, Channel 4 Television. Could I talk to you about your research, sir, and your commercial ambitions?
My name's Brian Deere, and I've spent the last 12 months investigating a health scare that's not really like any other. Health scares, well, they come and they go, but this one's different. This one's changed people's lives.
Driving, streaming, same time, looking at the camera.
You've got some parents shunning a vaccine against infectious diseases that could kill or disable their children. And then you've got other parents like Damien and Stacey, who I'm going to see now, agonising over the fact that their child became autistic soon after a shot of MMR. 3-year-old Rebecca is autistic.
Definitely.
There are an estimated 100,000 children in Britain suffering from the disorder, and they exhibit a wide range of behavioural problems.
I think maybe you have to push that one.
Oh. I remember the first actual book that I got about autism, and I read it, and as I turned each page, I cried, because it was like reading a diary about my own daughter.
One sign of Rebecca's autism is her need for repetitive routines, which she never wants her parents, Damien and Stacey, to vary. She insists that her zipper always be in the same position, and she must always follow the same route from her home. Rebecca hardly speaks. Her vocabulary is minimal.
She didn't just say, in it? That's not what she said, right?
Her vocabulary route from her home. Rebecca hardly speaks. Her vocabulary is minimal. And her poor communication combines with her need for routine to produce sporadic outbursts of frustration, even anger, when events aren't exactly as she expects.
What can your daughter be like when she's, if you like, at her worst?
I think the most terrible time is when she headbutt me and the t-shirt was full up of blood, and that's how much she damaged me, and she was actually laughing.
And if she starts acting up, I mean, do other people behave in a strange way towards her or treat her differently, do you think?
Yeah, because sometimes the looks, it's really awful. And I've actually gone home and cried a couple of times. It really gets to me, that.
But at times, Rebecca seems like any other child.
Yeah!
She loves playing in the park and has a big thing for music.
Why would she be doing that now? Why do you think she's behaving unusually?
I don't know, she's autistic. How am I supposed to answer the question? The fuck?
Probably just because we stop the music, you know.
Oh, so if we stop the music, she'll get upset?
She gets upset, yeah.
Rebecca was routinely vaccinated with the triple measles, mumps and rubella jab, but her parents left it late because of the MMR scare.
Well, there was this whole controversy about it in the news, and it made me a bit apprehensive about actually giving her the MMR in the first place. And I had a little word with my doctor, and my doctor basically reassured me.
But a fortnight later, Rebecca started shrieking, headbutting and acting up.
Fortnite?
She was born normal, and then all of a sudden, after 3 years, they're telling you, well, no, your child's not normal anymore, she's got autism. And you're like, what the heck is that?
What?
Her parents were quick to see a connection.
She what?
She was autistic. They blamed the vaccine.
You can't even imagine the guilt that you feel, because she never asked me, Mum, take me to get vaccinated. I still gave it to her, so I felt incredibly guilty.
Their anxiety was fueled by a theory from doctors proposing a connection between autism and MMR. Those doctors worked at this hospital, the Royal Free in London. Here in the late 90s, Dr. Andrew Wakefield was leading researchers trying to show a possible link between inflammatory bowel disease, autism and MMR.
We are seeking to establish whether there is a genuine causal association between the MMR and this syndrome.
It's the guy!
Or not. It is our suspicion that there may well be, but that is far from being a causal association that is proven beyond doubt.
In February 1998, Dr. Wakefield and his team published their findings in a leading medical journal. Described as an early report, the study was tiny, just 12 case histories, and Dr. Wakefield claimed that in 8, parents had blamed MMR.
Despite shortcomings in the
Wait, have we read that study before?
paper, the Royal
Good job, guys.
Free launched a media blitz for it that in time would circle the world. It was in a room behind me that they held a press conference, the results of which they surely must have foreseen. Dr. Wakefield, of course, sat in pride of place, but the meeting was also graced by bigger fish. There was Professor Arie Zuckerman, Dean of the Medical School, and also Professor Roy Pounder, who today is Vice President of England's Royal College of Physicians.
To launch a preliminary study with a press conference was a pretty unusual event. But broadcasters were also provided with a well-prepared video news release funded by the medical school. Although the hospital and the medical school consistently stressed the importance of MMR vaccination, the 20-minute video package contained claims which could only undermine the 3-in-1.
And here it is.
Claims school consistently stressed the importance of MMR vaccination. The 20-minute video package contained claims which could only undermine the 3-in-1.
And here it is. Now, to help us all out, they've kindly provided us with a really big needle.
Damn.
And a little girl in pain. This is a very slick package for their message.
Warning.
The family of an autistic boy saying they're sure it was MMR that done it.
To find out that it was caused by a vaccine that you agreed to have done is just devastating.
And Dr. Wakefield expressing his view that MMR should be split into single shots. Not once, not twice, 4 times.
My opinion is that the risk is related to the combined vaccine, the MMR, suspended in favour of the single vaccines.
That is an insane statement to make based off of this paper. That is a wildly crazy, irresponsible, especially if this is, and what he said earlier, the fact that they were doing a press release in 1990, whatever the fuck, off of this N equals 12 pilot study, that's a wild and crazy, stupid thing to do.
The single vaccines are likely in this context to be safer. Giving the measles on its own reduces the risk of this particular syndrome developing.
The hospital and the medical school deny that there was any campaign by them to undermine confidence in MMR. But a scare was born.
Claims there could be a link between a common childhood vaccine and autism. Questions were raised today about the safety of the combined mumps, measles and rubella vaccine.
New research showing a possible link with a bowel disease which could lead to autism.
You Brit fucks. Look what you guys have done. What the fuck?
Although the Royal Free's video package also contained a brief interview urging caution, it was Dr. Wakefield who made the news.
Measles, mumps and rubella given together may be too much for the immune system of some children to handle.
Not surprisingly, this claim also made the press. And it was the call to ban the triple shot that caught attention. At the government's Health Protection Agency, scientists watched the unfolding scare with alarm. Senior epidemiologist Dr. Mary Ramsey was baffled.
Dr. Andrew Wakefield believed that the MMR should be broken up into single vaccines. Can you think of any basis for that?
Absolutely none at all. There's nothing in his work that really suggests where that came from. And it really was a very unfortunate thing to say, because that's the thing that's had the most impact, I think, on the public, who are very confused now about whether there is some problem with combining the vaccine.
So from your point of view, this research and this proposal from the Royal Free Group, and Dr. Wakefield in particular, that the vaccine should be broken up, just came out of the blue?
Absolutely.
So why was Dr. Wakefield questioning the triple vaccine? Was there more we should have been told? This is the London Patent Office. In their archives, they keep a copy of every UK patent application filed by inventors who want to protect their commercial interests.
What worried parents didn't know is that...
I feel like this music, it's like Metal Gear Solid 2, what the fuck?
9 months before the press conference and video release, Dr. Wakefield and the Royal Free Medical School had filed the first in what would become a string of patent applications. Now look at this. Even as the MMR scare that they had started gathered pace, they filed documents in Britain, the United States, Canada, Australia and worldwide, claiming to have discovered, firstly, their own allegedly safer vaccine against measles, and secondly, treatments, perhaps even a complete cure for inflammatory bowel disease and autism.
Wow.
The public was unaware of the patent applications, and many of Dr. Wakefield's colleagues were also in the dark. In 1997, Ian Bruce was Professor of Molecular Biology at Greenwich University and worked closely with Andrew Wakefield and his research team.
Can I ask you what you make of that and what you're seeing on that page there?
Why is a compounded drug considered a patent, but the code for a computer game server is copyright? For copyright and trademark stuff, I don't believe you have to disclose everything about it. I think for patents generally, I think you have to disclose like all the mechanisms and stuff. But like if you wanted to patent a computer program, you might have to literally disclose like the source code or something. I might be making some of that up, but.
Well, it's something that I've never seen before, but I mean, the interpretation of that is quite clear to me, and that is that they have a vaccine for measles, which presumably is an alternative to the existing vaccine.
And then there was this patent application, which followed shortly after the press conference at the Royal Free Hospital.
Uh-oh.
The plans for new products were nothing if not ambitious. Remember, they also described a treatment or even a complete cure for both inflammatory bowel disease and autism.
These sound like big claims to be making.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that they're fairly enormous claims, if they're valid.
If they'd got these products that they're claiming here, would that be big money? Would it buy you a medical school?
Well, I think that it might very well buy you a medical school. I mean, I think that the market for vaccines, especially globally applied vaccines, are obviously potentially enormous.
And then a treatment for autism.
I think that goes without saying.
Patent applications are public documents, and there's nothing wrong with inventors, or indeed medical schools, protecting their discoveries. But should we have been told that the Royal Free School of Medicine and Dr. Wakefield had these commercial interests?
It's something that should have almost certainly been made public before now. The more that they can highlight the potential danger that would be linked to vaccination with MMR, and the more that they could highlight the benefits of alternative vaccination with their product, then obviously the greater the ability of their product to compete, and the greater chance that it would be economically successful.
We wrote to the medical school asking them about their patent applications. They replied strongly denying any vested interest in attacking MMR. In part 2, letters between senior Royal Free doctors questioning the ethics of Dr. Wakefield's research. We show the medical school's patent applications to experts.
It just doesn't make sense. Drum and bass, or what do they call this? This would name to be DMV, right?
And
What would you call this? What is the genre of like electric?
The American scientist
Electronic.
named as the co-inventor.
Do you believe that autism can be
It's Stan
cured?
Lee!
Yes.
What the Jungle? Wait, what did he just say?
Enter.
Do you believe that autism can be cured?
Yes.
Whoa. Okay. That's Fudenberg.
When Dr. Andrew
Is it?
Wakefield undermined confidence in MMR back in 1998, he didn't mention that he and the Royal Free Medical School had plans for their own products, including a rival vaccine and possibly a complete cure for autism. Publicly, the emphasis was on research.
We sincerely hope that we can do something to ameliorate the damage that has been done, but we do not yet know whether that's the case.
So what exactly was Dr. Wakefield's invention? The technical description in the patent documents outlines a complicated process to make capsules. It includes injecting mice with measles virus, extracting their white blood cells, freezing, thawing, and mixing these with human cells, and injecting the stuff into pregnant goats.
Hell yes. And then sucking it out their tits. Whoa, that was the doctor! Or does he only use the blue phone booths? I've never watched that show in my entire life, so.
As luck would have it, world experts in inflammatory bowel disease, Dr. Wakefield's speciality, have gathered in Oxford for a conference. Maybe someone here can throw light on his revolutionary rival vaccine and products.
Summarize what I've told you so far.
He uses red phone booths. Okay.
6 or 7 molecules that form the connection.
Professor Rick Blumberg is an immunologist of the gut and president of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America.
You want me to look through this?
Yeah, just have a quick glance.
I asked him about the technology outlined in the Royal Free Medical School's patent applications.
I don't know what they're looking at. I just don't know what they're looking at in the end.
What?
They're basically taking white blood cells. They're actually, what's interesting, they're taking them from a mouse.
Yeah, problem?
So I'm not sure how that has to do with a human.
So you put measles virus
into mice.
Into mice.
Right.
Take some of the white blood cells
out of those mice.
Out of the mice. And what do they do with them then?
And then it's I'm trying to be very careful that I use my words sparingly.
Loser.
But they then inject that into a pregnant goat.
Okay.
And then collect the colostrum.
That's what colostrum is.
It'd be basically the goat breast milk.
Okay.
Yeah, I was right. Suck them titties.
Does all this seem somewhat strange to you?
In a word, yes.
During breaks, I checked Dr. Wakefield's pregnant goat remedy with 2 more experts.
Its probability of having any positive effect is going to be extremely small, if any. It just doesn't make sense. The whole technique doesn't make sense.
I would say it's not credible.
Really strange.
Back in the lecture hall, there was a face from the Royal Free's press conference. Professor Roy Pounder, Dr. Wakefield's former boss, now Vice President of England's Royal College of Physicians. The 2 men's relationship has long been close. They even briefly dabbled in business. They were both shareholders in a company called Immunospecifics, which was meant to fund further research by selling diagnostic kits based on Dr. Wakefield's theory. I've been trying for months to ask him about Immunospecifics.
Oh, Professor Pounder. Brian Deere, Channel 4 Television.
Oh, hello.
Could I talk to you about your collaboration with Andrew Wakefield at the Royal Free Hospital?
No, we wanted to talk before about this. It's fine, thanks very much.
So could we perhaps have an opportunity to chat? That's right.
We can make a booking to see, that'd be fine.
So what should we do? We should call you at the hospital?
You could talk me out, make an appointment, that'd be fine.
Sometime next week?
I'm not really doorstep, okay? Thank you.
Sometime next week, perhaps?
Yeah, ring me up next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Professor Pounder has been reported in newspapers criticising MMR. But fair's fair, I took him by surprise. So as agreed, the next week, I called him.
Spoiler alert. No response. Or he's not going to agree to
hello,
say
Professor Pound. It's Brian Deere from Channel 4 Television here. You're not prepared to be interviewed by me?
Got him.
OK. Well, I've tried. Thank you very much, sir. Bye-bye.
Got him.
Professor Pounder said, and I quote, "I don't want to be interviewed by you at all."
I wrote to Professor Pounder asking about immunospecifics, which was incorporated in February 1999 and dissolved nearly 2 years later. Professor Pounder replied that he couldn't comment on the issues raised in this programme because Dr. Wakefield's research is currently the subject of a General Medical Council inquiry.
Uh-oh.
But what about the pregnant goat technology? Where did that come from? This is Spartanburg, South Carolina. It's the home of a once eminent immunologist, Professor Hugh Fudenberg.
Fudenberg? Get this guy out of my country.
Professor Fudenberg has long been controversial. In 1989, he was caught up in a bizarre lawsuit involving the Food and Drug Administration, which told him he had to stop injecting his autistic child patients with blood products.
What? I thought this was America.
Then in 1995, he was suspended from practicing medicine and made to pay a $10,000 fine for his misuse and misprescribing of controlled drugs.
Despite his past, Professor Fudenberg is cited as the joint inventor of the Royal Free Medical School products. The documents say he's based around here, in the medical district just outside downtown Spartanburg, at the impressive-sounding Neuroimmunotherapeutics Research Foundation.
OK, so here's a UK patent application with a priority date of June 1997. That's 9 months before the press conference that started the MMR scare.
Okay.
And the applicants are the Royal Free Hospital School of Medicine, which is in London, and the Neuroimmunotherapeutics Research Foundation of Boiling Springs Road, Spartanburg, which is here.
Okay.
Doesn't look like one of America's premier research foundations. And in fact, it looks as though they've gone away.
It turned out that Professor Fudenberg lives on the shores of Lake Bowen, just outside Spartanburg.
Wait, this guy's in America.
So they've gone away. Look like nation of the Willing's premier.
Look at how his car gravitates to the left side of the road. Where were the coppers at to take this fucking guy down? What the fuck? Look at him. What's he doing over there? What the fuck?
It turned out that Professor Fudenberg lives on the shores of Lake Bowen, just outside Spartanburg. The professor is semi-retired, but still charges up to $750 an hour to treat autistic children.
Damn! You have to be autistic to agree to those rates. Well, I guess that makes sense, huh?
He's the grandfather of the MMR scare, and first published allegations of a link with autism a decade before Dr. Wakefield.
I mean, I wonder, what do you make of Dr. Wakefield as a person? I don't know if you've met him.
Yeah, I've met him. I stayed at his house.
And what do you think?
Okay. Do you think that, like, just a little bit, he could be like the father of...
Over nearly 10 years.
Tom Scott? Come on. He's like his dad. Absolutely, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. Absolutely.
Think of the work that he's done and has
I think it's good. He's very slow. He's a gentleman. Plays lots of soccer. Lots of other things. Takes his time, but it's been very sound.
Now, how is it that we have a documentary by bongers and research by bongers, and the American is the guy with all the fucked up teeth? What the fuck? This is royal propaganda.
But also claimed at one point to have discovered a treatment, possibly a complete cure for autism.
He was wrong.
Ooh.
He wanted to get me involved in that. I would have part.
Oh.
It didn't make sense to me. I forget what it was, but it didn't make sense.
He wasn't brave enough to drink the titty goat milk. Hold on, I need to sort the fuck up.
That was the one with the goats?
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense then?
No.
So where was he getting that from?
I don't know. It's just a wild idea, I guess. want to set up a corporation, make me a partner. Give me £60,000. I want no part of it.
And what would that do, that corporation?
I don't make money, I guess. I wasn't interested in money. I wanted to make it quite clear I was doing this for scientific motives, not for monetary motives.
Despite the fact that the professor's name features on the patent documents, he claims it was put there without his consent. He wants nothing more to do with the pregnant goat capsules. He says he's invented a better treatment, which he makes in his kitchen.
Now, using this technology, do you believe that autism can be cured?
Yes.
Cured?
Yes. It's cheap, it's oral, no injections.
Whoa.
1 pill a day, every other day for 3 to 6 months.
Damn.
And where does that come from?
From my bone marrow.
From your own personal bone marrow?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems extraordinary.
Oh my God. He has the cure for autism in his own bone marrow? What a actual god.
Yeah.
Good for you, dude.
But it wasn't just Andrew Wakefield who collaborated with the Maverick professor back in 1997. It was also a major British hospital's medical school.
Uh-oh.
As more patent applications were filed, the MMR scare, launched at the Royal Free, was gathering pace, fueled by a stream of heart-rending claims by parents. Many mothers and fathers, desperate for answers, have given their support to Dr. Wakefield. And the Royal Free became a magnet for autistic children drawn from all over the UK. They came to Malcolm Ward, the Royal Free's paediatric gastrointestinal unit, which at the
Thank God they censored the baby's face.
They came to...
Because, holy Christ, you don't want somebody going after this kid 10 years later. It's like, wait a second. I know you, motherfucker.
Malcolm Ward, the Royal Free's
that
paediatric
goddamn toddler.
gastrointestinal unit, which at the time was a centre for 2 activities. Some children were being treated for a range of gut problems. But there was also the research being conducted by Dr. Wakefield, trying to find a link between the live measles virus in MMR, inflammatory bowel disease, and autism.
Wow.
We've now looked at 40 children, and 39 of those had exactly the same findings, and that's been intriguing.
Wow.
You're doing really well there. Well done.
The children, some as young as 3, were subjected to a battery of tests, including a colonoscopy, commonly used to investigate bowel disease. This procedure involved pushing a tube into the child's rectum to examine the intestine and collect tissue samples. These were tested for measles virus, which Dr. Wakefield believed could prove a link between MMR and autism. But he didn't find the vital evidence.
The work certainly raises a question mark over MMR vaccine, but there is no proven link as such, and we are seeking to establish whether there is a genuine causal association between the MMR and this syndrome or not.
There was, however, growing concern among some of the medical staff about the research and its impact on the children.
I don't know how careful he's being when he's citing that, but one thing you're supposed to be careful of, I believe, if you're doing good research, is you have to start with a hypothesis in mind. And then you have to investigate based on that hypothesis, and then you have to tally up the data and then go through the study based on your hypothesis. You can't just collect a bunch of data and then look for stuff, because like your confidence intervals are only 95%. If you collect enough data about any group of people, especially on a small number, you'll find anything that you, or not anything you want, but you can find something almost every time. And you can even find something theoretically with a high enough confidence interval for it to be a statistically significant finding. But this is why you're not supposed to start just like collecting data and then doing all the math over it to see where you can find something significant. So if he did start this study out looking specifically for the measles virus or whatever, that's what he was looking for and he didn't find it, that really should be, in my very uneducated opinion, that probably should be the limitation of the study. Like that's all it should really look for. And any other investigation like this, I would say, or any opining on any of this is kind of inappropriate, if that is indeed what the study was looking for initially. But jelly beans cause acne. Scientists investigate, but we're playing Minecraft fine. We found no link between jelly beans and acne. That settles that. I hear it's only a certain color that causes it. Scientists. We found no link between purple jelly beans and acne. We found no link between brown jelly beans and acne. We found no link between pink jelly beans and acne. We found no link between blue, teal, salmon, red, turquoise, magenta, yellow, gray, tan, cyan, or cyan. We found a link between green jelly beans and acne, and then none for mauve, beige, lilac, black, peach, orange. Green jelly beans linked to acne. 95% confidence. Wow.
I've obtained confidential letters between the then Dean of the Royal Free Medical School and a consultant in community child health.
In July, it's a different cat, different friend's cat.
In 1990.
Destiny, explain the joke. The joke is that a confidence interval is giving you a 95% chance that the true value that you are attempting to measure is within your range. Ideally, this is a range that excludes the null value. But the 95% confidence interval means that if you collect a whole bunch of data and you just start looking everywhere for certain types of things, inevitably you will find something that 95% is not 100%. You'll find something that looks like, oh shit, this is like a statistically significant thing, especially if it's not something you're initially looking for. If you measure enough and then you correlate data enough, you can find something that seems like something, but it's not good science. I think this actually might be, is this considered p-hacking? Is this what p-hacking is? Destiny, not trying to actually, but people for sure collect data before developing research in mind. Large data sets are pretty common, at least in social sciences. I don't know if you can do this type of p-hacking with, like if you're relying on census data with like thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know if you can p-hack data sets that are that large. I think that this has to do with smaller data that you're like uniquely collecting is where you can run into these types of issues.
Consultant in community child health. In July 1998, Professor Arie Zuckerman invited comments on the ethics of the research being carried out by Dr. Wakefield's team. He noted,
I should add that I have voiced concerns in the past on aspects of these studies.
Professor Brent Taylor, a Wakefield critic, responded,
I've had concerns about the ethics of this research from the inception, particularly the issue of gaining informed consent from the children, and also the invasive and extensive nature of the investigations.
The Royal Free say they were entirely satisfied that Dr. Wakefield's research was subjected to rigorous and appropriate ethical scrutiny.
I'm told the medical school has advised staff not to speak to me, but to give you some idea of the high level of concern over the care of autistic children taking part in research here, let me read you the opinion of one consultant given to me over the telephone. I feel the whole show was in terrible turmoil, he said. Nurses were leaving and saying they didn't like what was being done to these children. Junior doctors were unhappy. It needed 3 people to hold these kids down in some cases just to have blood taken. These are difficult children to explain to.
People are saying you can p-hack on huge data sets as well. I just wouldn't know how you would do it exactly, I guess. But
what is going on? I feel very sorry for the children who I feel were being abused. From his own laboratory that dramatically contradicted his theory.
He should have taken into account my work before going ahead and publishing.
And we meet the man himself.
Dr. Wakefield, I'm sorry to interrupt. Brian Deere, Channel 4 Television. Could I talk to you about your research, sir, and your commercial ambitions? Excuse me.
Could I talk to you, sir? Parents have very serious questions to ask you, sir.
Wow.
When Dr. Wakefield launched the MMR scare back in 1998, he did so with a study of just 12 autistic children. And the evidence for a link between MMR and autism was anecdotal. The parents of 8 blamed the vaccine. It's a way to scientifically proving a link.
What we've been able to do here, by directly visualizing and biopsying the bowel, is to confirm, at least in this group of children, that there is a link, may well be a link between gut inflammation and behavioral abnormalities.
But I've discovered evidence that casts a different light and undermines Dr. Wakefield's credibility. At the time, Nick Chadwick was a PhD student and Dr. Wakefield's research assistant.
What's Andrew Wakefield like, the man?
Very charismatic, very driven, and very enthusiastic. So, as in terms of a leader, he's a very good person to take charge of a group.
According to Dr. Wakefield's theory, live measles virus in MMR can cause inflammatory bowel disease, and this can lead to autism.
Okay.
He believed that the virus could persist in the guts of autistic children who've been vaccinated with MMR. Chadwick's role was to test samples from the children. First, he established a scientifically valid system using sensitive molecular methods that would satisfy Dr. Wakefield and his head of department, Professor Roy Pounder.
Were Professor Pounder and Dr. Wakefield happy with the work that you'd done on that way of finding measles virus?
I believe so, yeah. They were happy to put their name on a paper. Andrew Wakefield encouraged me to write the paper and helped me submit it.
The paper was published in the prestigious Journal of Virological Methods. Having agreed his technique with his supervisors, Chadwick set about testing tissue samples from autistic children for measles virus, again under Dr. Wakefield's supervision.
And are these children the same children that went on to be published in The Lancet, leading to the MMR scare?
Yeah, that's right.
Did you find measles virus in those children?
No.
No. No single case did I find any measles virus in those children.
Wakefield and Chadwick weren't just looking for measles virus in gut samples. Some children had also been given lumbar punctures, a difficult, painful procedure to take brain fluid from the spine.
You looked at some cerebrospinal fluid taken by lumbar puncture. Did you find any measles virus in those?
No.
So you found no measles virus in the children who were presented to the public at the very foundation of the MMR scare, where Dr. Wakefield's theory was that it was measles virus itself that was responsible for a bowel disease and then leading on to some kinds of autism, and you found no measles virus.
That's correct.
And you must have gone to him one day and said, well, I've done the tests on these children, I couldn't find measles virus. What did he say to that?
We had long discussions about possible reasons why my results weren't linking in with the hypothesis. My personal opinion was that it's not there, but Andrew Wakefield had some issues about sensitivity problems, which I found a bit surprising since he'd already approved of the methods that we used to try and detect measles virus.
Wow.
If Dr. Wakefield now had concerns about Chadwick's molecular tests, previously he had endorsed them. In an earlier study on adults with inflammatory bowel disease, Chadwick had used the same methods, and Dr. Wakefield and Professor Pounder co-authored this paper. Another of the authors was Ian Bruce.
Whoa.
He's a renowned molecular biologist and supervised Chadwick's royal-free research alongside Dr. Wakefield.
Oh my God. Where are my typers at? Is that an IBM Model M keyboard?
And supervised Chadwick's...
One of the originals? Does it have the curly cord?
Royal-free research alongside Dr. Wakefield.
If there had been measles virus there in those tissues, would he have found it?
My confidence is that he would. His approach was rigorous.
Oh, people said no, fuck you.
He designed and performed the experiments in a way that was, in my view, scientifically correct. And if he had found, if there were to have been measles virus present, then he would have found it.
7 years on, and Nick Chadwick, now Dr. Chadwick, works at the University of Manchester. He's lived with the knowledge that when Dr. Wakefield launched the MMR scare, Dr. Wakefield knew that his own laboratory had dramatically contradicted his theory.
Why are you telling us this now?
Well, in hindsight, I realised that quite a big story was made out of the initial claim, and I think it's important to tell people about how there really wasn't the evidence there right from the beginning to justify those claims.
What did you think when you saw this press conference and all the publicity that followed and this tremendous scare?
Well, I assumed that it would die its own death, the whole story, to be honest. I assumed that if Andrew Wakefield couldn't get the molecular evidence, then the story would die away. My own personal perspective, I was a student, Andy was the group leader. There wasn't really much of an argument that I could make, to be honest.
So how did you feel when the MMR scare took off?
I was shocked, frankly.
Do you think you should have said something at the time?
It's a difficult question to answer. I don't know that anybody would have listened in a way that would have made a difference. In a purely personal context, yeah, I feel that probably we should have been more vocal.
But if anyone should have been more vocal in 1998, surely it was Dr. Wakefield himself.
Yeah. What the fuck?
And there was something else he didn't tell the assembled press.
Yeah, what? What?
As I revealed in the Sunday Times last February.
Unknown to Dr. Wakefield's colleagues, The research on autistic children had begun with a contract from a firm of solicitors who were trying to sue MMR manufacturers. And when that information emerged from my investigation earlier this year, the authors of the research voted to retract their claim of ever having found a possible link between MMR and autism at all.
Uh-oh.
But the damage had been done.
No parent wants
That
to
wasn't even my soundboard. That was actually part of this video.
expose their child to unnecessary danger.
Holy shit. Wait, that's so hardcore. Wait, what the fuck?
No parent wants to expose their child to unnecessary danger. Yet measles, mumps and rubella can still be a serious threat.
The government responded with glossy
Why?
ad campaigns, urging parents to have their children immunised.
Jesus.
But confidence in MMR had been shaken.
Too late.
And many parents were left confused.
Come on, have some lunch. Have some lunch, darling.
Here's 14-month-old Erin. He's Tracy Broadhurst's first. She's given up work to care for him full-time, and now she's facing a dilemma. Erin is due his MMR.
Hey, good tomatoes, aren't they?
I'm ultimately frightened that I'm going to take this beautiful, lovely little boy, smiling happy, into the surgery to do the right thing for him, and the actual upshot of it will be that it won't be the right thing because I'll have caused a reaction in his body that's going to give him this development disorder. And then there's the fear of, if I don't take him along and he gets measles and he ends up with a form of brain damage or even dies because of it, I've then got to live with that as well.
After speaking to a health visitor, Tracy put aside her fears and booked Erin for his 3-in-1. But then she went on the internet.
Uh-oh. The internet.
I've tried to find out the facts for myself.
Not that.
To make an informed choice. I've got on one hand a set of professionals saying, in their opinion, it's safe, but then there's another set of professionals saying, well, hang on a minute, I don't believe that to be the case. So I thought, I'm not going to take him today, so I didn't take him.
Nearly 7 years after the Royal Free and Dr. Wakefield launched the vaccine scare, many parents remain worried. MMR vaccination rates have fallen from 92% to as low as 50% in some areas.
Jeez.
And doctors say Britain may this winter be faced...
I thought it was going to be like a 96% uptake to like, or compliance whatever, to like an 85%. Yikes.
Its first measles epidemic since the 1980s.
People say, well, measles used to be a routine illness. Everybody got it. I certainly had it. Why should we be so worried about it? Is it that big a deal?
Yeah, it was a routine illness. Everyone caught it, and every year about 100 children died of it, even, you know, as recently as the 60s. And worldwide, about 1 million children die each year from this disease, and it could well end up being a public health disaster.
Those fears for public health became a reality in the year 2000 in Ireland, where vaccine take-up is traditionally lower than in Britain.
Uh-oh.
There was a serious measles outbreak in North Dublin, which left 111 admitted to hospital, including 13 in intensive care, and 3 dead. Dimitri Pop and his wife Maria had just moved to Dublin from Romania to start a new life. They now have 2 children, Mark and Abigail, but in the outbreak of 2000, their first child, Naomi, was one of those who died. She was 14 months old and nearly due her MMR when her parents became concerned.
She has spots all over her and she couldn't eat. She had high fever, so I brought her in hospital and she was seen by the doctor. They said it's only measles.
Initially, she seemed to respond to treatment. But 5 weeks later, her parents noticed something worrying.
Uh-oh.
Like, she would twitch her eye like that, with no reason. And she went still for a couple of seconds. And we suddenly said something is wrong with her. The doctor who seen her, he said she's got brain damage.
So what was
She's Irish.
that day like? You went to the hospital and the doctor said, well, your daughter's got brain damage.
No, you won't be able to understand the feeling. Like, it's like the end of the world.
They were saying that she's going to die. We just said, I don't want to hear that, I don't want to believe that, I hope she's going to be okay, and I know you do your best.
In Naomi's case, measles attacked her brain, producing a horrifying 11-month degeneration. She spent her last 3 weeks in intensive care.
And what were those 3 weeks like?
Oh, the worst. I didn't want to accept it until it happened.
But then that final day came.
It did, yeah.
The final day came and it was a bad day.
So we knew she's dead. Like, they were taking out her tubes and all that stuff. I know we're not going to bring her back, but even like if we know that we'd save someone else's child from this, would be helpful. Like, it's not fair for children to die like that. It's not fair at all.
Dr. Wakefield left the Royal Free by mutual consent in December 2001. At that time, the patent applications for a rival vaccine and a possible cure for autism were relinquished by the medical school and assigned to him. He now spends much of his time in America. He's the research director of a non-profit organisation in Florida called the International Child Development Resource Centre. This draws parents of autistic children, some of them from Britain, in search of answers and treatment. They have a sister organisation, the Good News Doctor Foundation, displaying a heady mix of religion and medicine. Among their activities, they promote a range of products for autism, described as nutritional supplements, including CoQ10, colostrum gold, and a hormone injection called secretin. At this London hospital, Pat Howlin is a professor of clinical psychology and has studied what she believes is a growing market in alternative products for autism.
Now, here's something I can't understand. We've got research paper after research paper on secretin, and they all say that this hormone does not work. How is it then that we find secretin still being sold, still being given to parents for their children as some kind of remedy for autism? What's going on there?
I think the trouble is autism's a big money spinner.
It's crazy that back in, what was this, like 2000 or whatever, people were still like falling for this shit. I guess they didn't have the internet as much like we do now, where you can very easily look this stuff up and see how bullshit it is, so nobody falls for this type of stuff anymore.
Their children as some kind of remedy for autism. What's going on there?
I think the trouble is autism's a big money spinner for a lot of people. Parents are very vulnerable, they desperately want help for their child, and obviously it's nicer to have a simpler answer like this, a few shots of secretin, pills labelled IQ or concentration or whatever. They're simple answers.
Now, we paid, what, £21.15 for this little pot of pills. C-Buddies, which is enzymatic therapy, or there's another one here, MSM for sulfation, or coenzyme Q10. I mean, what is going on with all this kind of
people
stuff?
are making a lot of money out of it. And
It's as simple as that?
I'm afraid so, yes. For most of these, there's absolutely no research evidence one way or the other.
Now, that's a pretty bad picture, isn't it, for the parents of autistic children?
Yes, yeah. No, I think they are a very vulnerable group.
I've come back to America in search of Dr. Wakefield.
Again?
Not least to ask him why he lends his reputation to an organisation that promotes products for which I can find no convincing scientific backing.
This is Melbourne, Florida, about an hour southeast of Orlando. It's a conservative country, strong Republican. And it's the kind of area where, if it comes to finding a cause for autism, they blame the government before they blame God.
What?
The International Child Development Resource Centre, where Dr. Wakefield is research director, is based here.
OK, so here seems to be the deal. Dr. Jeff Bradstreet, Dr. Jerry Cartnell and Dr. Andrew Wakefield. And it seems that a big part of what they're doing here is to promote various products which they say can help autistic children, such as Pure Kids, for example, which they say has been developed by neurological specialists, and colostrum gold. Now,
wait, what state do they say they're in right now?
Recommend these at various meetings which they attend around the United States, charging parents perhaps $250 a go, and we'll just see what they've got to say about these products here.
Florida? Where at in Florida? Can we go here? Oh my God. What was it called? International Research Child Development Autism Florida. Fuck. What was the name of this thing again?
This is charging colostrum such as Wakefield. And it's OK, so here seems to
International Child Development Resource Center. International Child Development Resource Center. Florida. Wait. Dentist. Oh, you don't think they exist anymore, maybe?
To be the deal. Various products which they say can help autistic children, such as Pure Kids, for example, which they say has been developed by neurological specialists, and colostrum gold. Now, they recommend these at various meetings which they attend around the United States, charging parents perhaps $250 a go, and we'll just see what they've got to say about these products here at their offices.
Okay.
My name's Brian Deere. I'm from the UK Channel 4 Television. We'd like to talk to you about some of the products you're selling for the parents of autistic children.
Okay, hold on just a moment.
Thank you.
Fuck! Help! I need help! Okay. First of all, listen, don't eat rice with your fucking hands. This is retarded and stupid. You don't need to do this, okay? Listen, you have all the other things going for you. You don't get credit for this, all right? No one cares, all right? More people eat rice this way than there are Americans. This is a 1-to-1 lift. Somebody should quote tweet this with the clip.
That we couldn't do the. All right, you look like a future pedophile in this picture. Number one.
Name on Earth. Read a fuck.
It reeks of this conversation.
McLovin? What kind of a stupid name is that, Fogel? What, are you trying to be an Irish R&B singer?
Oh, they let you pick any name you want when you get down there.
And you landed on McLovin.
Yeah, I was between that and Muhammad.
Why the fuck would it be between that or Muhammad? Why don't you just pick a common name like a normal person?
Muhammad is the most commonly used name on Earth. Read a fucking book for once.
Fogel, have you ever actually met anyone named Muhammad?
Why? Like, bro, stop.
Now, I'm also hoping to contact Dr. Wakefield. Is he? I believe he's your director of research.
Right, but he's not in our facility or even in the state right now. I don't exactly know where he is, but Dr. Bradstreet would be.
Right, but he's still your director of research, yeah?
You have to clarify that with Dr. B. Okay. Maybe you could come around 11:30 tomorrow morning. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
But Dr. Bradstreet cancelled his appointment and said he didn't want to be interviewed by me. In a statement, he said that any suggestion of profiteering was completely baseless. He claimed that many of his patients pay nothing for his services and that the organisation does not promote any products as remedies for autism. Eventually, I tracked down Dr. Wakefield some 900 miles from Florida.
900 miles?
Indianapolis in the American Midwest. Dr. Wakefield is the star attraction here at a conference on autism. I've been trying now to speak.
Damn, this guy's like falling around. Holy shit.
With him for a year. We even wrote, and he didn't reply.
What? Did he say Nebraska? Wait, did he say
The
that?
meeting is organised by the Autism Society of America.
Shut up,
On the
tell me
US
to.
conference circuit, Dr. Wakefield has found a new audience for his theories.
Oh my god.
He was the last speaker of the day, so I approached
No,
him at
just
the
me.
end of his
Oh.
presentation.
Dr. Wakefield, I'm sorry to interrupt Brian Deere, Channel 4 Television. Could I talk to you about your research, sir, and your commercial ambitions? Could I talk to you, sir? Parents have very serious questions to ask you, sir. Excuse me, sir. Dr. Wakefield, sir. Sir, can we talk to you about your product, sir? Dr. Wakefield, sir.
I wanted to ask him about the patent applications and about his own lab contradicting his claims.
Dr. Wakefield, sir, we have very important questions to ask you about your research.
Oh, where's he
and
going?
your commercial ambitions, sir.
He's been researching fucking running steroids. Look at this guy go!
These are very important questions. I'm sure you would have the time to explain what you've been up to. If you're confident about your work, sir,
This is what Hassan claims me and Dan do to him, by the way.
and the quality of your research, sir,
Sir, would you like to debate Israel-Palestine? Sir.
and that your commercial ambitions will withstand public scrutiny, sir, you will stand your ground, sir. And
I wrote to Dr. Wakefield again. His solicitors first replied that it would be inappropriate to respond to the issues raised in this film because of the General Medical Council investigation into his research. Later, they said that he was under no legal or professional obligation to disclose the patents, which they claim were unrelated to his views about MMR.
We get to speak the truth, and he's out helping people. Why don't you guys go?
Please, you do not get press approval. You will have to leave the premises. Please. Before I call the Indianapolis Police Department.
Indianapolis.
Stacey and Damien no longer believe that their daughter's autism was caused by MMR. After researching and remembering Rebecca as a baby, they realised that she had already shown symptoms before she was vaccinated.
Autism is strong in my family.
Oh no.
I've got 2 cousins that were diagnosed with autism.
You just remember that.
So I'm starting now to believe that it's hereditary.
Now they're angry that anybody raised a link with MMR at all.
What was this,
No.
Hold on. All right, we'll find this. Was it this?
Survived it, and he still was making people. And they were fortified to go. Paper,
whatever. But yeah, it's like Jewish space lasers are trying to drive up property costs for
no one cares.
Oprah Winfrey or whatever. But yeah, it's like Jesus, yeah. Like nothing can happen anymore without it being some crazy fucking conspiracy.
Yeah, personally, I've had like people close to me that was like damaged by that vaccine. Like my friend's legs turned purple. They look like sweet potatoes. He can't walk. And then I knew when I bought this car, right when the vaccine came out, the finance guy was doing my paperwork, and he was telling me, he's like warning me, like, don't take that vaccine. I was like, why? It's supposed to be great. He's like, well, my daughter took that vaccine, and the reason why she took the vaccine, she wanted to go to Europe for a vacation. COVID messed up everything, so she went in and had to take the vaccine so she could go. 2 weeks after she took the vaccine, she got a blood clot in her lungs and she died. Yeah. And the biggest red flag for me She's 22 years old. Yeah, about that vaccine was it was forcing on people who had already contracted the virus survived it, and he still was making people. And they were forcing on people who were in great health. We all know, I think, what was it, 70-80% of the people who died was people over 65, and they had something wrong with them. They already had one foot in the grave.
Well, careful, because when you say something.
So I think I asked them, like, do you know people that have had like bad reactions to the vaccine? So they have one friend whose legs turned purple. I don't know what the fuck that is. And then a car salesman told them that his daughter died. So a car salesman guy said something, okay? These are the, like, people that they know that have been vaccine injured, okay?
Something wrong with them, like obesity is a comorbidity of, which is already like,
that's what I'm saying. Like 70% of people, I think it was even higher, maybe even 80%. 80% of the people died from it. It might have been 90% that when they died from COVID, it was they was over 65, or they had one foot in the grave. They were obese, they had heart problems or something, but it was forced on healthy people. And I was like, one of my friends, that girl that died at 22, that's why I think that vaccine was garbage.
Do you know anybody that died of COVID?
Yeah, my family members on my wife's side.
How many?
3.
Jesus.
Yeah, 3.
Well, so when you think of like, we've got vaccine injury, did you know anybody that died of or had a vaccine injury?
I know of 2 people. I didn't know them personally.
Okay.
Like even the anecdotal evidence doesn't, wait, what?
But Mike. Yeah, I think count him, you already counted him. No, there were 2 other people.
Yeah. So that's interesting that doesn't factor in sometimes. Like somebody's like, oh yeah, like I knew this guy or I knew a guy who had a vaccine injury. Like, oh, you know anybody who died of COVID? And like, yeah, I got like 3 family members. Like,
yeah, I know 3 people died. Yeah, but they were like, the 2 that I know in my family that died, they were big people. They were obese. They were.
Okay.
Your child gets diagnosed with such a terrible diagnosis of autism. That's such a life-changing and challenging thing that you have to go through. You don't need people putting that into your head.
Hearing people trying to say it's the MMR, some are saying it's not the MMR, it's just really confusing, and it's even makes it harder to come to terms with.
Now she's been diagnosed as autistic. What are your hopes for her now?
Well, it's just one simple hope, and I'm just hoping that she'll talk, and we wish that we've got to be able to communicate with our child.
Anything else?
Just that she'll be happy and people will accept her.
Do you think they will?
Who knows? I hope so.
Hassan Malding?
Except for Palestine, classic. But even then, he's like more progressive than the obvious person. Anyway, whatever. Hassan, let it go. He's not going to come on your stream. First of all... What the fuck is this idiotic... Oh, God. Hidegio offliner. Permaban. Okay. Bitch, you think I give a fuck about the New York comptroller coming on my fucking stream? Some of y'all are so fucking stupid, dude. You think there's a cynical reason as to why I'm saying the things I believe? At what point are you dumb fucks gonna realize if I'm saying something, there is no secret reason for why I'm saying it other than I believe it, okay? Holy shit. How many fucking years has it been of people being like, Hassan, if you keep this rhetoric up, you're gonna get fucking banned. Hassan, if you keep this rhetoric up, no one is gonna fucking come on your stream. Hassan, if you keep this rhetoric up, people are gonna get mad. God damn, dude. Anyway, that fucking particular chatter is the most annoying, okay?
Ooh.
That's why I fucking banned them. They're unfucking bearable, constantly talking about drama baiting while simultaneously drama baiting. Let's continue.
He said he hoped a Republican could beat him, or maybe the sitting mayor.
We have a good independent running, Mayor Adams, who's a very good person.
At an unrelated press conference on crime stats, Mayor Adams ducked questions about Trump, preferring to focus on the role of the mayor to let federal immigration agents do their job.
And anyone that is an elected or not should never interfere with federal authorities carrying out their function.
Mamdani said he was humbled by the breadth of his support. Over 540,000 New Yorkers voted for him, saying he is, quote, excited to expand this coalition even further as we defeat Eric Adams and win a city government that puts working people first. Andrew Cuomo's voters are elected in
November, except one thing. My favorite thing is when people go, my family lost everything. I hate socialism. I'm from Cuba. My family lost everything in Cuba. And then you look at their family history and their fucking grandparents were getting their eyeballs clawed out by the fucking Batista administration. And it's like, okay, dickhead, why the fuck are you shitting on the dudes who actually liberated your fucking family from...
I like how he goes to Cuba and ignores the fact that every South American that's escaping any type of regime that's remotely socialist fucking hated it there, but... All right. We've done the background. Now it is time to watch what I'm sure is going to be an amazing interview between Michael Knowles and the man, the myth, the legend, Andy Wakefield. Oh boy. Let me use the restroom and then one sec. Holy shit, that plug-in thing works. There's 2 of them in there. And I've seen none of them fly around me. What an absolutely god-tier device. Thank you, Amazon.
And the chief target of everyone who wants to defend all vaccines, really, and especially the MMR vaccine. According to, I think it was David Weldon, former congressman who was nominated for CDC under Trump, you are the most unfairly vilified man on planet Earth. And I said, well, is that true? Let me look up a little bit about Andy Wakefield. And I know you certainly have the best Wikipedia page I've ever seen. Now, some of my friends have been unfairly maligned on Wikipedia as conspiracy theorists, hoaxsters, bigots, whatever. The first line...
Can you explain why Jewish Americans are expected to vote for a man who directly calls for their deaths when another Democrat Party candidate option exists in the form of Eric Adams? I don't believe that Mamdani directly calls for your death. He's just kind of weak on rhetoric, number one. Number two, he doesn't have any influence on American foreign policy, so it's not relevant. And number three, Eric Adams is a literal pawn puppet tool of the current Trump admin. So,
line of your biography on there is Andrew Wakefield is a fraudster and a former medical doctor and a this and a that and a this and a that. Take me back to the beginning. Before you were one of the most politically controversial figures on the planet, you're a doctor.
Well, there I was. It was 1981. I graduated in medicine from St Mary's Hospital Medical School in London. I was one of 5 generations, now 6 generations of my family to graduate from that medical school. Medicine was really in our blood, I suppose you could say. And I was entirely mainstream, whatever that means. And I have a specific interest in inflammatory bowel disease. I got my fellowship at the Royal College of Surgeons, my fellowship at the Royal College of Pathologists, and I was running a research team at the Royal Free, which was part of the university teaching hospitals at the University of London. And it was a very exciting time. We were making great progress. And we had started to examine the cause of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's colitis, and had made some very interesting observations in the context of natural measles infection and unusual exposures to natural measles leading to these diseases. And in 1995, I started getting calls from...
Okay, but Mamdani is literally a pawn puppet of people like Hassan Piker. If you believe this, then you're out of my reach. So good luck.
Parents leading to these diseases. And in 1995, I started getting calls from parents, highly articulate, intelligent parents, saying my child was perfectly normal. They had speech-language interaction with their siblings. They were sleeping well, eating well, growing well. And then they had their MMR vaccine. I wasn't anti-vaccine, doctor. I took them to be vaccinated on time. And within a very short space of time after the vaccine, they lost all their skills. Speech, language gone. Their eyes glazed over. The lights went out in their eyes. It was a very common description. They stopped sleeping at night. They were screaming. They were in pain. I knew they were in pain, even though they lost the ability to communicate. As their mother, I knew they were suffering. And I said, how can I help? They said, well, they were eventually diagnosed with autism. And I said, I know nothing about autism. You must have got the wrong number.
Because even this part of the story is pretty shocking. It's not as though you started out investigating autism. As you say, you were investigating gut issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do you go from investigating measles and vaccines and gut issues to autism?
Well, that's exactly the question I asked them. I said, when I was at medical school, autism was so rare, we weren't even taught about it. There was no class from autism.
I think
1 in 10,000 children.
Yes, whatever statistic I saw, it said in 1966 it was 1 in 2,500, and then in 2000 it was 1 in 150, and then today it's 1 in 36 kids is getting diagnosed with autism.
Even more, 1 in 31. 1 in 20 boys. It's more common in boys than girls.
How do you explain that?
Well, that's a very good question. So this is what the parents brought to my attention. They said, doctor, my child has intractable gastrointestinal problems, diarrhea, alternating constipation and diarrhea, bloating, abdominal pain, failure to thrive, all the cardinal features of an underlying inflammatory bowel disease. But the doctors and nurses I've been to see, doctors, say, this is just part of autism. Get over it. Put your child in a home. Have another child and forget about it. I thought, this is extraordinary. I've never heard medicine respond in this way at all. Now, they said the other thing, doctor, is there is an epidemic of this problem, of developmentally normal children suddenly losing their skills and becoming autistic. And so I said, okay, now the fundamental rule of clinical medicine, okay, let's go right back to the beginning, is to listen to the parents. No one knows children like their parents, particularly the mother. There is a connection there that no pediatrician can usurp. Okay, so it is the golden rule is you put all of your biases aside and you listen to the parents. What are they telling me? Is there a consistency to this story? Is there a coherence? Is it possible that an underlying inflammatory bowel disease can interact with the brain and damage it? We don't know. But certainly in diseases like celiac disease, where there is an allergic sensitivity to gluten in wheat, then the presenting features can be dementia or seizures or developmental regression or autism. So yes, there is a link. We don't know what the nature of that link is, but yes, there is a plausible link. And I said to the Department of Health once, if I take you for a pint of beer, you may begin to understand what I'm talking about. They thought I was trying to offer them to go out for a beer and enjoy their company. Nothing could be further from the truth. What I was saying is if you drink a pint of beer within a short period of time, you will feel the cerebral effects of that pint of beer on your brain. There is a gut-brain connection. This isn't difficult.
Even simply, if you take alcohol out of it, some women in my life, if they are a little late to lunch, they get a bit hangry, okay? You see emotional and psychological connections.
We are one entity. Right. This is not separate from this. So I thought, right, we need to look at this, put all of our biases aside, whether my children were vaccinated or not, nothing to do with it. They're telling us a story that we have to act upon. And this is serious. It's clearly serious because until proven otherwise, these children have an intestinal disease. And if it's correctable, can we make their lives at least bearable, if not reverse some element of what's going on? So I put together a large team of some of the best people in the world. The leading pediatric gastroenterologist in the world, Professor John Walker-Smith, and his team from St. Bartholomew's Hospital, psychiatrists, neurologists, and people. And we came together and we investigated these children according to their clinical need. It wasn't research, according to their clinical need. John Walker-Smith, the leader of the clinical team, made the decision that these children merited investigation. And lo and behold, when we scoped them, we biopsied, we looked at the biopsies under the microscope, there was inflammation. The parents were right. And when we treated that inflammation with the kind of medication that we would use for Crohn's or colitis, anti-inflammatories, dietary intervention, removal of gluten.
Hold on, which study is he referring to right now?
The team made the decision that these...
What was the original, was he referring to the one we read? Or was he referring to a different study here?
Children merited investigation, their clinical need. John, when we came together and we investigated these children according to their clinical need. It wasn't research, according to their clinical need. John Walker-Smith, the lead...
John Walker-Smith. Was this the second one with 40 people? Oh no, J. Walker-Smith. Is he referring to the second one with 40 people, or is he referring to the first one with 12 people?
Leader of the clinical team made the decision that these children merited investigation. And lo and behold, when we scoped them, we biopsied, we looked at the biopsies under the microscope, there was inflammation. The parents were right. And when we treated that inflammation with the kind of medication that we would use for Crohn's or colitis, anti-inflammatories, dietary intervention, removal of gluten and cow's milk products from the diet, there was a dramatic improvement. Again, these insights had come from parents. We'd followed up on those insights, and they were true.
There's a dramatic improvement in...
This is not what that study was at all. So he must be talking about a different one. There was a second one that he said that they, like 39 out of 40. What am I thinking of? Up to January 20th, a further 40 patients have been assessed, 39 with the syndrome. Does anybody know what that study is? Patient study, Andy Wakefield. No. Look at the end of the OG study. I just see this addendum. But I don't know what the...
in the symptoms of autism.
Not just the bowel symptoms, but the cognitive symptoms of colitis, anti-inflammatories, dietary intervention, removal of gluten and cow's milk products from the diet. There was a dramatic improvement.
I don't know which one he's citing. He might just be lying. Yeah, is he just lying? Because if he's talking about his study, he's just fucking lying. It sounds like he's accurately describing the testing and everything they did, or the analysis and examination they did of the biopsies and everything, but there was no treatment in this study at all. I would be surprised if there was a treatment in this one, because again, it just says assessed, like with the syndrome or whatever. So he's just lying, I guess.
Again, these insights had come from parents. We'd followed up on those insights, and they were true.
There's a dramatic improvement in the symptoms of autism.
Not just the bowel symptoms, but the cognitive symptoms as well. People say, well, they were just out of pain. They were feeling better. They were asleep. No, this was children who were using words that they had not used for 5 years. Words that you would have disappeared from their vocabulary were all in there. They came back.
Because your critics say, well, sure, maybe the autism symptoms set in around the time that kids are vaccinated. However, that's just the time. It's just coincidental. The time that you get the vaccines is around the time that autism symptoms manifest. But what you're saying is, yeah, but hold on, when we started treating the gastrointestinal issues, the vaccine symptoms started to subside. So it can't just be a mere coincidence here, because we did something, we intervened, and that had an effect on the autism symptoms.
Yes, you had an exposure and a withdrawal effect, just as you say. They were fine, they weren't fine, they improved. And those time points were punctuated by their exposure to the vaccine and then their removal of these potential toxins from the diet.
And no one else has followed up on this research in any country around the world? No company wants to make a fuck ton of money treating any of these conditions? Nobody has any interest anywhere, private or public, in any country for 30 years to follow up on this groundbreaking cure for autism?
And the historical teaching of the experts in autism was that symptoms manifest from birth. Autism is genetic and it starts from birth. Suddenly it was, oh no, the symptoms manifest at 15, 18 months. That's not what you said. That's not what it says in the textbooks. You say regression. So here's the key is that where do you go from here? Because the parents had said, my child was fine, they regressed. They regressed in many cases after a vaccine. They have a bowel disease until proven otherwise. The diet works and they can improve. The expert opinion at that time is, my dear boy, children are autistic from birth, it's genetic, there is no regression, no developmental or behavioral regression, there is no link with any kind of underlying bowel disease, that's just incidental. There is no improvement, the diet has no effect at all. The medical experts, God save us from medical experts, were wrong on every single count. You could take that library of textbooks written by experts and burn it to the ground.
One of the craziest things that like MAGA does right now, or stupid people, or whatever you call these people, is they will make a prediction, okay? They'll make a prediction. Time will pass. It never comes true. And then they'll say, we were right. Like this happened with so much COVID and vaccine related stuff. There's going to be so much vaccine injury. Like the COVID is all fake and like there's a billion different things. And none of the predicted claims about the infinite encroachment of government power and vaccine passports and all none of it came true. And they're like, looks like we were right about everything. No, motherfucker, you were literally wrong about everything. Did we forget history? We can go back and look at your predictions, motherfucker. None of them came true. Literally none of it happened. It was all bullshit. How are you trying to say you were right the whole time? What?
Value of the story from one parent telling you what actually happened. It is an extraordinary reiteration of that fundamental rule of medicine, and something that we've largely forgotten in our arrogance in medicine, to listen to the parents, because they were right on every count. Now, when they say, I believe my child regressed after a vaccine, with that knowledge, do we dismiss their story? Do we say, actually, you may be right, but this isn't going to be good for my career, so would you take your child and leave this room and shut the door behind you? Thank you. That's what happened.
That is
what was happening.
Yeah.
And that's not what I signed up for. That's not why I went into medicine. I didn't have a bias one way or the other about whether the vaccine...
Destiny talking about bad predictions is ironic. I feel like most of my predictions over the past few years politically, I feel like they've actually been decently okay. Excuse me, what are we referencing here?
Vaccine was involved, but there was a moral and professional obligation to investigate, to answer their questions. Because if it were true that there is an epidemic of this particular problem, then we need to know this. We need to know it. And my pediatric colleague said to me at the time, Andy, we as pediatricians cannot be seen to question the safety of MMR. I said, what does that mean? Is your priority not to your patients, rather than to your reputation amongst your careers at the Royal Society? I mean, who are you answerable to? But that was the position. We cannot be seen to do this. And I went to see the dean of the medical school.
Okay, so this isn't going to be anything about... Oh my God. How can you guys consume so much slop? Like what conservatives watch, another 2-hour podcast about the experts being wrong about everything and big pharma. And it's like, how can you another one of the same hour and a half podcasts, another of the exact same? Oh my God.
I was called into his office. He said, Andy, if you continue this vaccine safety research, it will not be good for your career. There was no overt threat. He was absolutely right. It wasn't good for my career. But, I was a sort of headstrong, somewhat idealistic young doctor. And I was raised in a particular way. And I thought, it just made me angry. It made me determined to work twice as hard, because it was such a tragedy. And it seemed to me that if it were avoidable or treatable, then we should know that. And that was the course I pursued. I was entirely open about it with my colleagues at every stage. But that was the moral and professional obligation that I felt I had. And
so what year was this?
Every state, then we should know that. And that was the course I pursued. I was entirely open about it with my colleagues.
Entirely open about it with my colleagues. You wasn't open about all the conflict of interest, but okay.
At every stage. But that was the moral and professional obligation that I felt I had. And
so what year was this?
This was from 1995 onwards.
And in 1998, you published the famous study in The Lancet.
Right. Yeah.
So the study comes out, and I actually have trouble in the popular reporting on this, even determining what the study said, because they seem to accuse the study of saying things that it didn't necessarily say. So what did the study say?
The study was a case series. So this is the way in which human disease syndromes are described. You have a small group of people who have a consistent pattern of signs and symptoms that merit investigation in their own right. That leads to hypothesis testing studies. Is this different from something we've seen before? Is it new? What's causing it? Those are downstream. This was a case series just reporting what the parents had told us, what the doctors had told us who referred them, and what we found on clinical investigation. We could not leave out the parents' reference to the MMR, but we said at the conclusion of the study, this study does not prove an association, let alone a causal association, with the MMR vaccine.
So hold on.
So he's correct that that's what the study said, but that's not what he was saying in the media. That's not what he was out there saying, which is the huge fucking problem. And that's not what he's gone out to say. So now he's doing earlier what I did, where I okay, when you read the study itself, it doesn't actually seem that objectionable or objectionable at all. But that wasn't the issue. The issue were the crazy statements that he made afterwards about it.
This is the part that's the craziest in the story to me. You are blamed for creating vaccine skepticism. You are blamed with measles outbreaks. You are blamed and called a terrible fraudster and a horrible practitioner of medicine because you said in your 1998 study that the MMR vaccine causes autism, except you didn't say that.
Quite the opposite. And we said what we do need is further research into this matter, and that was it. And the study was really a report of the bowel disease in combination with this regressive developmental disorder.
Okay, now, but I read, again, just in popular reporting, this was more than a few years ago now, that study, even with its modest conclusion, was retracted by the authors of the study. But I'm sitting across from one of the authors of the study. You didn't retract it. So what was that? Was the study retracted?
No, it wasn't. And this was another myth that's been perpetrated by the media.
I went into this interview thinking, I don't really know anything about this. And now I'm convinced I actually know less about this than I thought I did going in.
Why not do any research before interviewing such a controversial figure, but okay.
Yes, the study, it made no claim of causation. Okay, this was the important thing. And that's what I was accused of labeling MMR as the cause of autism. No, we faithfully reported the facts of what we found on clinical investigation. The clinical findings from Professor John Walker-Smith and his team, the pathologist's findings down the microscope from a highly experienced expert pathologist, the psychiatric findings, the neurological findings.
Wait, real quick. Is there a link to the press conference that he did about that study? Andy Wakefield press conference. Can I find that? Is that David Pakman? Holy shit, he's a little baby boy.
Careful about being clear that there were no actual mechanisms that they had identified. In fact, they didn't have any real evidence. This was something.
What would it have been? 1998?
You are considered by some to be a controversial researcher, based mostly on the first study that you did. Describe that if you can.
Certainly the first study was a case series, a report of the clinical findings and the histories of 12 children who had regressed into an autistic spectrum disorder. 8 of the parents of the children saying that this was following an MMR vaccine. And our duty was not only to investigate those children to see if we could get to the root of their symptoms, in particular their bowel symptoms, their diarrhea, their pain, and their maldigestion, but also to report their history. My child regressed after an MMR vaccine. We don't place any interpretation on that, and we said specifically this does not prove an association between the vaccine and the disorder, but we have an obligation as doctors and scientists to faithfully report what the parent has told us.
What did the study?
What? You don't have any obligation to put this in a study. This isn't like you're treating a patient and you have to follow up on care or whatever. That's just a complete total fucking lie, but okay.
Fine. What was the conclusion in essence?
The conclusion was that there is a bowel disease in children with autism, which is new, which has not been investigated before. That this may well be related to the developmental regression since they had occurred at around the same time, and that the association, the parental association with MMR exposure needed to be thoroughly investigated.
What year was this?
This was 1998.
Now, while you certainly in the study, which I have read, did not recommend people stop vaccinating their children. It didn't make any sort of recommendations like that. In fact, you've told me before your children have been vaccinated, your own children.
That's right, my first two children received MMR.
However, there was sort of a scare, and people in England, some people...
Fuck! Is there really no original, try Google. Andy Wakefield, 1998. Andy Wakefield, 1998. Press conference. Are you planning on covering the BBB more in detail at some point? For what? It's shit. It's dog shit. Everything about it is dog shit. I don't know what else you want to go over about it. It's dog shit. It's horrible. It doesn't do what they want it to do, and it certainly doesn't do what we want it to do. It's just dog shit. But in actuality, it's based because it makes me richer and it fucks you losers over.
In the majority 5 years ago, a bombshell was dropped by scientists announcing the results of research, which some of them thought cast doubts on the safety of the triple vaccine against measles, mumps and rubella.
I do think that there is a case for dissociating these vaccines into their component parts, separate measles, mumps and rubella vaccines, given perhaps by separation of 1 year.
So he's recommending that as the lead author of this study, and the same time he's presenting it, assuming this is in 1998. So like he didn't have that in the study, but he sure as fuck was saying it, no? Why can't I... Is this not recorded anywhere? Is this the Great March of Return? Is this because we looked this up before on this website? The fuck? I vividly remember the press conference. God damn it. Part of it in the HBomberguy video?
Chief, is that still a current reference? I've aged 10 years in the last 2 weeks. Time is meaningless. But despite a lot of...
It's like...
Page can see? Really
Also, he kind of looks like Bill Hader a little bit here too, right? I see it. All right. Whatever.
That's what we reported, and we urged further research. It was a great opportunity to understand what was going on and take what was historically an irreversible condition and be able to reverse it, to be able to treat it, to ameliorate the symptoms in these children and make their lives at least better. So it was it should have been an exciting time, but we defended.
Wait, when I heard this said, I thought that he like left his son's birthday party to go take blood samples. But he took the blood samples at the birthday party. Wait, what? The doctor whose study triggered a collapse in public confidence in the combined measles. Did they have the birthday party in a hospital? Maybe his child had leukemia. The doctor whose study triggered a collapse in public confidence in the combined measles, mumps, and rubella and rubella vaccine told a disciplinary panel last week that he made up details of his son's birthday party, at which he took blood samples from several children, when giving a speech in California. The Lancet later repudiated that paper after it emerged that Dr. Wakefield had extensive financial ties to lawyers and families who were pursuing the manufacturers of the vaccine and the courts, and that most of his research participants were litigants. So the actual children so the families themselves had children, and the families were litigants against, this is immediately... That's so far beyond. That's worse than conflict of interest. You're beyond. Oof. Okay. The GMC's charges against Dr. Wakefield include allegations that in 1998, while a consultant at the Royal Free Hospital London, he unethically paid children at his son's 10th birthday party, each to give blood samples that he wanted for his research. Last week, the GMC panel saw video footage of a speech Dr. Wakefield gave in 1999 at a meeting of parents of autistic children called by the Mind Institute of the University of California, Davis, where he jokingly described children fainting and vomiting after giving blood. 2 children fainted, one threw up over his mother. He told his laughing audience in the clip, "People said to me, you can't do that. Children won't come back to your birthday parties." I said, "We live in a market economy. Next year they'll want 10 pounds. But Dr. Wakefield told the GMC panel that he made up these details to amuse his listeners. It was the end of a long and rather exacting talk for the parents, and it was an attempt to introduce a little bit of levity, he said. It was a quip, just a story. The way these stories are told, the audience responds, you tend to respond back, so the story was told, but it had no bearing on the truth at all. Okay. Jesus. Wait, is there any more evidence of that? Andrew Wakefield, study families suing MMR vaccine. Was looking for an expert witness to start a planned class action regarding alleged vaccine damage. Barr hired Wakefield at £150 per hour plus expenses, and only then do they recruit the 12 children. Actively seeking the parents of cases that might imply a connection between MMR and autism, Barr and Wakefield convinced the UK Legal Aid Board, a UK government organization of financial people who cannot afford access to justice, to assign £55,000 to fund the initial stage of the research. The project was intended to create evidence for the court case, but this only became publicly known 6 years after the Lancet report. Ooh. Okay. The first part of the special BMJ series, Brian Deere, that's the guy who did the investigative work, and we watched a documentary on him, the journalist guy, exposes the bogus data behind claims that launched a worldwide scare over the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, and reveals how the appearance of a link with autism was manufactured at a London medical school. When I broke the news to the father of child 11, at first he did not believe me. Wakefield told us that my son was the 13th child they saw, he said, gazing for the first time at the now infamous research paper which linked a purported new syndrome with the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. There's only 12 in this. The paper was published in The Lancet on February 28, 1998. It was retracted on February 2nd, 2010. Authored by Andrew Wakefield, John Walker Smith, and 11 others from the Royal Free Medical School, London, it reported on 12 developmentally challenged children and triggered a decade-long public health scare. Onset of behavioral symptoms was associated by the parents with measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination, and 8 of the 12 children began the paper's findings. Adopting these claims as fact, its results section added, in these 8 children, the average interval from exposure to first behavioral symptoms was 6.3 days. Mr. 11, an American engineer, looked again at the paper, a 5-page case series of 11 boys and 1 girl, aged between 3 and 9 years. 9 children, it said, had diagnoses of regressive autism, and all but 1 were reported with nonspecific colitis. The new syndrome brought these together, linking brain and bowel diseases. His son was the penultimate case. Running his finger across the paper's tables over coffee in London, Mr. 11 seemed reassured by his anonymized son's age and other details, but then he pointed at table 2, headed neuropsychiatric diagnosis, and for a second time objected, that's not true. Child 11 was among the 8 whose parents apparently blamed MMR. The interval between his vaccination and the first behavioral symptom was reported as 1 week. This symptom was said to have appeared at age 15 months, but his father, whom I had tracked down, said this was wrong. From the information he provided me on our son, who I was shocked to hear had been included in their published study, he wrote to me, again, we met in California, the data clearly appeared to be distorted. He backed his concerns with medical records, including a royal-free discharge summary. Although the family lived 5,000 miles from the hospital, in February of 97, the boy, then aged 5, had been flown to London and admitted for Wakefield's project, the undisclosed goal of which was to help sue the vaccine's manufacturers. Unknown to Mr. 11, Wakefield was working on a lawsuit for which he sought a Bowel-brain syndrome as its centerpiece, claiming an undisclosed £150 an hour through a Norfolk solicitor named Richard Barr. He had been confidentially put on the payroll 2 years before the paper was published, eventually grossing him £435,643 plus expenses. Curiously, however, Wakefield had already identified such a syndrome before the project, which would reputedly discover it. Children with enteritis and disintegrative disorder, an expression he used for bowel inflammation and regressive autism, form part of a new syndrome, he and Barr explained in a confidential grant application to the UK government's Legal Aid Board before any of the children were investigated. Ooh, that was in the seeking money. He already was explaining the syndrome. Yikes. Destiny, I found a transcript. Oh, you found a transcript of the press release? Nice. Or of the thing they did. Okay, hold on. Okay, I've always heard about like the autism study and that the autism study was debunked or whatever, but I just assumed that it was like they fudged a few of the numbers or some bullshit. I didn't realize it was like this fucked. This is like super mega fucked, right? Like, and it wasn't even a good original paper to base something this broad on. N equals 12? Did they say the number of children that were involved in it? I guess they were trying to downplay the study initially. Did they say 12 children? I think they did, right? Nonetheless, the evidence is undeniably in favor of a specific vaccine-induced pathology. The two men also aim to show a sudden onset temporal association, strong evidence in product liability. Dr. Wakefield feels that if we can show a clear time link between the vaccination and onset of symptoms, Barr told the legal board, we should be able to dispose of the suggestion that it's simply a chance encounter. But Child 11's case must have proved a disappointment. Records show that his behavioral symptoms started too soon. His developmental milestones were normal until 13 months of age. Notice the discharge summary. In the period 13 to 18 months, he developed slow speech patterns and repetitive hand movements. Over this period, his parents remarked on his slow, gradual deterioration. That put the first symptoms 2 months earlier than reported in The Lancet and a month before the boy received the MMR vaccination. And this was not the only anomaly to catch the father's eye. What the paper reported as a behavioral symptom was noted in the records as a chest infection. Please let me know if Andrew W. has his doctor's license revoked, wrote Mr. 11, who is convinced that many vaccines and environmental pollutants may be responsible for his childhood brain disorders. His misrepresentation of my son in his research paper is inexcusable. His motives for this I may never know. The father need not have worried. My investigation of the MMR issue exposed the frauds behind Wakefield's research, triggering the longest ever UK journal, blah, blah, blah. Mr. 11 was not the first parent with a child in the study whom I interviewed during my inquiries. That was Mrs. 2, the first of the parents to approach Wakefield. She was sent to him by an anti-vaccine campaign called Jabs. Her son had regressive autism, long-standing problems with diarrhea, and was the prime example of the purported bowel and brain syndrome, still unsubstantiated 14 years later, and now 30 years later. This boy would appear in countless media reports and was one of the 4 best cases in Barr's lawsuit. Did they still try this lawsuit and fail? Did they actually file anything for this? Does anybody know? Somebody look that up. I traveled to the family home 80 miles northeast of London to hear about child 2 from his mother. That was in September of 2003 when the lawsuit fell apart after counsel representing 1,500 families said that, on the evidence, Barr's autism claims would fail. Okay. By that time, Mrs. 2 had seen her son's medical records and expert reports written for her case at trial. Her concerns about MMR had been noted by her general practitioner when her son was 6 years old, but she told me the boy's troubles began after his vaccination, which he received at 15 months. He'd scream all night, and he started headbanging, which he'd never done before, she explained. When did that begin, do you think? I asked. That began after a few months afterward, but it was concerning me enough. I remember going back. Sorry, I don't want to be like massively pernickety, but was it a few months or a couple of months? It was more like a few months because he had this kind of, slide down. He wasn't right before it started. Not quicker than 2 months, but not longer than how many months? What are we talking about here? From memory, about 6 months, I think. The next day, she complained to my editors. She said that my methods seemed more akin to the gutter press. But I was perplexed by her story, since there was no case in the Lancet that matched her careful account. According to the paper, child 2 had his first behavioral symptoms 2 weeks, not 6 months, after MMR. This was derived from a royal-free history, citing headbanging and screaming at the start, taken by Mark Borelowitz, a child psychiatrist and a co-author of the paper. He saw Mrs. 2 during the boy's admission at age 8, after she had discussed her son's story with Wakefield. As I later discovered, each family in the project was involved in such discussions before they saw the hospital's clinicians. Wakefield phoned them at home and must have at least suggestively questioned them, potentially impacting on later history taking, but I knew little of such things and shared my confusion with Walker Smith, whom I met shortly after Mrs. 2. There is no case in the paper that is consistent with the case history Mrs. 2 had given me, I told him. There just isn't one. Well, that could be true, the former professor of pediatric gastroenterology replied, disarmingly. He knew the case well, having admitted the boy for the project and written reports for Barr, who paid him £23,000. Well, so either what she is telling me is not accurate, or the paper is not accurate. Well, I can't really comment, he said. You really touch on an area which I don't think should be debated like this, and I think these parents are wrong to discuss such details. Well, you could be put in a position of having a lot of medical details and then try to match it with this because it's a confidential matter. It was not merely medically confidential, it was also legally protected, a double screen against public scrutiny. But responding to my first MMR reports in the Sunday Times in February of 2004, the GMC decided to investigate the cases and requisitioned the children's records. The regulator's main focus was whether the research was ethical. Mine was whether it was true. So as a 5-member disciplinary panel trawled through the records with 5 Queen's Counsel and 3 defendant doctors, I compared them with what was published in the journal. And then multiple discrepancies. Damn. Okay. By Brian Deere. Wow, Ian Denlip, thanks for subbing. A man is suing his former legal team for pursuing hopeless claims based on flawed research into the MMR vaccine. Has emerged. Matthew McCafferty, who was diagnosed with autism 3 years after receiving the vaccine, is taking legal action over a legal claim that he says had no chance of succeeding. He's suing the lawyers Hodge, Jones, and Allen. Was this related to any of that? No, okay, don't care about that as much. Okay, this was the Dr. Wakefield, what exactly have you found? Interview for the research team leader. Well, this work started just over a year ago when we were contacted by a group of mothers who complained that their children had been developing perfectly normally until they had encountered an environmental insult. In many cases, they claimed it was the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, and then they had lost all their acquired skills, such as speech, language, and developmental milestones. So this is a lie, right? It seems like these patients were either sought out or were funneled from anti-vaccine groups. And at the time, we were not sure of the implications of that, but what was interesting is that those children had also suffered gastrointestinal symptoms, diarrhea, alienating constipation and diarrhea, sometimes blood loss, and it became evident to us after 5 calls in 2 days that we had to look at this very seriously to investigate these gastrointestinal side effects in particular. Now, one of the questions that had been raised before, the claims had been put had been rather put to one side of gastrointestinal disturbances. These were just a function of the behavioral problems, but we felt they merited taking a little more seriously, and so that we investigated them. Interestingly, we set out a study, 10 children, we thought might find inflammation, perhaps in 1 or 2 based upon the history. We've now looked at 40 children, and 39 of those have exactly the same findings, and that's been intriguing. The children have a patchy inflammation of the colon, rather like colitis as we recognize it historically, and they also have great big swollen lymph glands in the terminal ileum, that is the end of the small intestine, and that combination, as we call it, ileohyperplasia, follicular hyperplasia of the terminal ileum and colitis is the core of the gastrointestinal syndrome. Interestingly, they also have all undergone developmental regression after a period of normal development. Interviewer, there has been concern recently over any long-term effects as a result of the MMR vaccine. Are you saying now then that there does appear to be a proven link between the vaccine and the side effects? No, the work certainly raises a question mark over MMR vaccine, but there is no proven link as such, and we are seeking to establish whether there is a genuine causal association between the MMR and the syndrome or not. It is our suspicion that there may well be, but that is far from being a causal association that is proven beyond doubt. But if you say that there's at least a question mark over it now, should the vaccine continue to be administered while you're investigating? I think if you asked members of the team that they have investigated this, they would give you different answers. And I have to say that there is sufficient anxiety in my own mind of the safety and the long-term safety of the polyvalent, that is the MMR vaccine in combination, that I think that it should be suspended in favor of the single vaccines, that is continued use of the individual measles, mumps, and rubella components. That's a crazy statement to give after this one, saying that, well, we haven't proven shit. That's a wild statement to give here. Jesus, but okay. Because that begs the question that, do the advantages of continuing with the vaccines outweigh the disadvantages of a problem developing if you continue to have them? Well, I think it's a very complex question. Certainly if you continue, as I would recommend to use the single vaccine, you do not incur a greater risk of those diseases in the children, and that you do not lose the benefits of vaccination if you space them over time. Oh my God, that statement. So even measles? Well, as yet we don't know, but there is no doubt that if you give 3 viruses together, 3 live viruses, then you potentially increase the risk of an adverse event occurring, particularly when one of those viruses influences the immune system in the way that measles does. And it may be, and studies will show this or not, that giving the measles on its own reduces the risk of this particular syndrome developing. So you're saying that a parent should still ensure that their child is inoculated, but perhaps not with the MMR combined vaccine. Again, this was very contentious, and you would not get consensus from all members of the group on this, but this is my feeling, that the risk of this particular syndrome developing is related to the combined vaccine, the MMR, rather than the single vaccines. Now, what you seem to be indicating is that the effects are on this intestinal disease of the gut and also autism, which is a personality disorder. What's the link there? How can there be a link? Well, this is intriguing, of course. We've been looking for the cause of autism in the brain for many, many years, and yet have failed to define it. People have been saying for some time, people on the periphery of autism have been saying for some time that this may well be related to bowel damage. The Italians, for example, have found that children who are autistic have in many cases a leaky intestine. Others, biochemists, have been saying that it may be a toxic state, that absorption of chemicals such as opioid, peptides, and morphine-like substances from the gut that you and I produce in our diet from milk and wheat are actually getting access through that leaky gut into the developing brain. And perhaps if that occurs at a particular time of life when the brain is rapidly developing, then it is susceptible to long-term damage. And that is intriguing again because many parents report that certain foodstuffs make their children's behavior much worse, and that withholding those foods improves their behavior. What we've been able to do here by directly visualizing and biopsying the bowel is to confirm, at least in this group of children, that there is a link. It may well be a link between gut inflammation and behavioral abnormalities. To be clear, that was not confirmed, that there's any kind of link. All you've confirmed is that both things apparently are occurring at the same time. That doesn't necessarily mean they're linked in any way. Is this likely to be a permanent damage, or can it be treated? We simply don't know at this stage. We entered this as a pilot study to look at 10 children, as we've now looked at 40. We've been going for a year. We sincerely hope that we can something to ameliorate the damage that's been done, but we do not yet know whether that's the case. Of course, there'll be many parents whose children have had this MMR vaccine who will now be concerned about what may happen to their children, what advice would you give them? Well, the interesting thing is that the damage, the behavioral or developmental change tends to occur quite soon after administration. And this is where why parents or GPs or pediatricians have been able to make the link, the association with MMR. So if that hasn't happened, then it is extremely unlikely to happen. But there are going to be patients, or there are going to be patients. I just had a brain destruction. But there are going to be parents now whose children are about to have the vaccination, and they're going to say, I'm not going to risk it. What would you say to them? Well, my message is for the Department of Health and the regulatory authorities, and that is that this needs urgent investigation. It needs funding, and it needs the appropriate levels of commitment in terms of basic scientific research and clinical research to answer the question. And until that time, we cannot offer any definitive evidence, any definitive message to parents about this. Jesus. My opinion, again, is that the single vaccines, measles, mumps, and rubella, are likely in this context to be safer than the polyvalent vaccine. Okay, so that was those are his statements around the time. Much, 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 much stronger than what the actual studies said.
Just findings down the microscope from a highly experienced expert pathologist, the psychiatric findings, the neurological findings. That's what we reported. And we urged further research. Here was a great opportunity to understand what was going on and take what was historically an irreversible condition and be able to reverse it, be able to treat it, to ameliorate the symptoms in these children and make their lives at least better. So it should have been an exciting time. But we defended the pharmaceutical industry, we defended government policy and the World Health Organization and UNICEF and the major pharmaceutical companies that make the vaccines, the American government. We defended a lot of people. And at that time...
You said, sorry, just to, because I speak American English and not your more beautifully accented English, you're not saying we defended, you're saying we had offended.
We had offended.
Yes, okay, yeah, so those are big interests to offend.
Oh yes, huge interest. Now, this is really interesting in a historical context because now we're all familiar with cancel culture. If you are a doctor, however eminent, you stand up and you criticize, say, COVID vaccine policy, that's the end of your job. Doesn't matter how many papers you publish, doesn't matter how eminent you are finished. The way in which the system historically now deals with this kind of problem is to simply cut the person's head off.
Except, just on the COVID example, we were told by the eminent public...
So, do you think that he's going to bring up any of the 30-year-old facts surrounding why this study was retracted, why his license was revoked, why people are so ass-pained about it, or will none of that come up?
Public health experts and by politicians who employ...
Destiny, isn't this the doctor that was hired to be part of the lawsuit going after the 3-part MMR vaccine? Yeah, he was supposed to be an expert witness for this. So, like, imagine some guy comes to me and the guy says, hey, listen, I've got a bunch of mad parents who want to sue. They want to sue this company. They want to sue Crayola Crayons because their kid's hair is too blonde. And I want to pay you a bunch of money to be an expert witness for this. And I go, okay, fine. So what is your theory? It's like, I think that they ate Crayola crayons and it turned their hair way too blonde. It got way too blonde. And I'm like, okay, hold that thought. And then I go to a medical board and I say, hey, just so you know, there's decent evidence for this disease called, it's called Crayola blonde consumptionitis, where kids that eat crayons, their hair turns really blonde, okay? So can you give me like 55,000 pounds to go study this condition? And the board is like, oh, sure, if you think there's evidence for it or whatever. And then they give me the money. And then I go, okay, hey, I'm calling the, who makes the competitor crayons to Crayola? I'm calling the, Rose Art. I'm calling the Rose Art Foundation. And if you guys have any parents that are really mad because they feel like their children's hair is too blonde, then go ahead and like have them call me. And then all these parents come in and like, hey, my kids ate Crayola crayons once and their hair is really blonde. And I go, sick. Ship me like 12 of these kids and let's go ahead and do a study on them to prove the existence of this disease that I'm being paid for by somebody else to be an expert witness to testify to the existence of in a court case that hasn't happened yet for a disease that there's no evidence of by a bunch of parents that are being selectively drafted from a company that also has a financial interest against the company that I'm going to be representing my clients against. Like, it's like so fucked. This is so beyond fucked, right? It's so fucked. But that's what this is. But we're not going to bring up any of this. Okay.
Them that the COVID vaccine was totally safe. It turned out it was not. People died. That it was totally effective in preventing you from contracting COVID. Those very same public health experts shortly thereafter admitted, actually, it doesn't stop you from receiving the infection. However, it'll stop you from transmitting it.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, those very same health experts told us it actually doesn't stop you from transmitting the virus, but it'll ameliorate the conditions. It'll reduce the danger of hospitalization or whatever. My only point on that is, those same public health experts admitted that the things they had just previously said as gospel truth were not true. So already there's a major credibility issue for the public health experts in recent memory.
Yeah. And so people know that now. They're familiar with it. And the doctors who stood up against them were bankrupted by legal fees, were removed from their positions, had their licenses taken away. These were some outstanding clinicians, outstanding academics, and they were just trashed, wasted for all time because they took a moral and professional stand on something. But then it was unheard of. So at the time, it was me and them. And this isn't a sort of feel sorry for Andy Wakefield. It's just an historical fact of life.
I do feel a little sorry for you. I mean, you did have your career taken from you.
But I was a consenting adult. I knew what I was getting into. And I just felt that I had to pursue this to its natural conclusion. There was nothing terribly grandiose about it. It was just the way I felt. And so I started to get labelled. Obviously, these labels became perpetuated in the media.
Conspiracy theorists.
And all kinds of things. And so that's fine. We continued the work until they made it impossible to go any further. And they levelled all kinds of allegations against me and against my colleagues.
Are we going to get into any of those and whether they were true or false, or
of research misconduct, the worst being the allegation ultimately that it was all fraud, it was all made up. And when you control the media, when you're in charge of the media, and your target is one individual with limited resources, that's kind of easy thing to do. They're an easy target.
Well, but the media, this was presented to that board of doctors or whatever, right? What evidence it said, and in Brian Deere's reporting, it said that this guy didn't call any witnesses or anything to defend himself. So
you take them out, and you hope that by doing that you will silence them, and you will provide an example to everybody else.
So they accused you of misconduct in the methods of the study. They accused you of taking money from other interests. They accused you. They had this whole litany of accusations in the popular media. Was there any truth to the allegations?
Here we go.
There was an element of truth, and the truth is, for example, the lawyers had come to me at some point during the conduct of this work, not the research, not the Lancet paper, and I had agreed, as is very common practice, to undertake a study to determine whether there was a link between the vaccine. Could we identify remnants of the virus in the diseased tissue? That would have been a strong indicator that there was a causal link. It wouldn't have been proof, but it would have been a strong indicator. It was part of that. That would have been a strong indicator that there was a causal link. It wouldn't have been proof.
Of measles, though, originally is what he was looking for, right? I don't think it's common practice to not even declare this. Why wouldn't you declare the conflict of interest?
Right, but it would have been a strong indicator. It was part of that hypothesis testing process. And this is very common. People work for both defendants and for plaintiffs in medical litigation. But I was single.
Also, I actually don't know that if that's true. Is it common to do research? Like to do unique studies simply for the purposes of a potential court case? I feel like you call expert witnesses and you cite research that's already done. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's been some, but to do unique special research just for a court case, especially when you don't even declare that conflict of interest?
Out as, Wakefield's doing this to undermine the MMR vaccine and launch his own vaccine onto the market and make a fortune. And
yes, they accused you of having a desired patent for a rival vaccine. So you're not saying that isn't true. You're saying this is common practice. You're going after me as though I'm doing something different or unethical.
And the allegation was I never told anyone.
Yeah.
Well, a year or two before the paper came out, I wrote to the dean, the medical school officials, to my line manager, Professor Roy Pounder, and I said, I have been asked to undertake this duty on behalf of these children to answer the question, is there not a link with the vaccine or evidence for a link? And I feel morally obliged to do it, and I'm going to do it. So they knew. I then told it was in.
Well, but you accepted this before the study was, before you even began the study, not when the study was done and waiting to be published. The timeline here is very important, but
the national newspapers a year before the paper came out. Then Richard Horton, the editor of the Lancet that published the paper, who subsequently denied it before the General Medical Council, our licensing body, was told 1 year before that I was working on behalf of these children in the litigation. There was no.
Well, if he denied it 1 year before and you said you emailed and you asked all these people, well, then just show the emails. That's super easy. You could just publish the emails and blow all these up. Has he ever published any of these emails? Anybody have any links?
To cover it up whatsoever. It's totally transparent. But the allegation was that it was a cover up. That I meant no one knew about it. Right. It was all a big secret. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But what do you do about that? When you don't control the editorial, they can say what they like. And then you've got to unpick that mess afterwards. Do what? Sue them. Suing someone costs $3 million. Where are you going to get $3 million from? They know that. These people have limitless resources.
Well, this is the purpose of lawfare is not necessarily to win in a court, though that sometimes happens. It's just to pressure the other guy who doesn't have pockets that are as deep as the litigant.
That's right. Justice, it seems to me, belongs to those who can afford it. And that was the circumstance here.
So then where does the headline that the study was retracted come from? Is it just out of thin air, or was it from the Lancet?
Wait, what is that? Was he even sued? I thought he just had his medical shit revoked.
As the litigant.
That's right. Justice, it seems to me, belongs to those who can afford it. And that was the circumstance here.
So then where does the headline that the
Like,
study...
you're the one benefiting from the justice belongs to those who can afford it. You're literally being paid huge bucks by a litigation firm to be an expert witness. He's saying he couldn't afford to sue them. Oh, okay. I mean, if you have a good case, find a lawyer, take it on contingency. Fuck it.
It was retracted come from? Is it just out of thin air, or was it from the Lancet? Or
let's come back to that. So I think 8 or 9 of my colleagues, were persuaded to sign the retraction of an interpretation. The interpretation being that MMR vaccine causes autism. I said, guys, when they asked me to sign the retraction, I said, we never made that claim.
You're asking me to retract something I didn't say.
How can you retract something that doesn't exist? But for political reasons, they were under pressure. I don't judge them, but they fell in line and did that. Me and 2 other colleagues just refused to do that. We said, no, we did not make that could be retracted in that way. So it wasn't the retraction of the bowel disease or the link with MMR or the regression or the diagnosis in these children. It was a retraction of an interpretation that was never made. And that's...
Except we read, like, afterwards for the interviews and stuff that you literally made all of these statements, like, as you were interviewing, doing the press release for this pilot study of 12 people.
That's the truth behind it.
Can I ask you what might be a...
He tried suing the journalist? Ooh, did he? Wakefield sues Deere. Oh, and he dropped the case. What even is this website? Why do they publish? I don't know, they published news articles from journals? I guess the journals also publish news stuff? Okay. Andrew Wakefield, the British gastroenterologist whose comments at a press conference in '98 sparked a scare over the safety of the MMR vaccines, that dropped his libel action against Channel 4. The case was due to go to trial shortly after the end of the 3-month disciplinary hearing. Radcliffe's Liberasseur, the solicitors acting for the Medical Protection Society, which was funding the libel case, said in a statement, consecutive hearings would have compromised Dr. Wakefield's preparation for both hearings and would have placed an intolerable burden on him. He remains confident that he will be vindicated. Lawyers say the society could face a legal bill of more than £500,000 for both sides' legal costs of the discontinued libel action. He sued Channel 4 and the investigative reporter Brian Deere. The program criticized Dr. Wakefield's methods and accused him of an undisclosed conflict of interest. He decided to drop the case. His decision to drop the case comes not long after a high court judge ordered the disclosure to his opponents of confidential documents supplied to the GMC for the disciplinary investigation, although there is no suggestion that the 2 developments are linked. Okay, so he dropped the case after... Oh, shit. No. Sorry, I just had a brain blast. I noticed that Pixie deleted her Substack, and I was like, why did she do that? It seems kind of weird. We're waiting on rulings from the judges. I wonder if, based on how they rule on the motions, because we haven't exchanged a discovery yet, I wonder if the motions go poorly, if they're just going to dismiss their case, and then she doesn't have to turn over anything. Holy shit. Can you do that? Is this allowed? Oh, I don't know. Sorry. That just popped in my mind. The documents included papers from his former employers, University College London, from the which one. Okay. So he killed the case right before they exchanged discovery, which should have vindicated him, right? He later denied a conflict of interest, said the money had gone to his then employer, the Royal Free Hospital in London, and not to him personally. But it emerged last month that he had also received hundreds of thousands of pounds in expert witness fees in the compensation case. Wakefield said that the work had been spread over almost 9 years, including during holidays, nights, and weekends, and had been used to run a treatment center in the United States for autistic children. Jesus. To be fair, wouldn't her willingly dropping the case be optically good for you? Actually, I don't know. I think I would rather win trial would suck because it'd be expensive, or win on summary judgment. Her dropping the case, because I feel like she could just say, I didn't have the money, and he was rich and harassing me, and so I had to stop because I couldn't fundraise enough. Oh shit, I didn't even consider. Okay, let's not think about that.
Stupid question.
Not at all.
Because you're mentioning a rival vaccine, potentially, that could have been patented. Why is it? I mean, I think of this as a parent. I got 3 young kids. Why is it that all the doctors are pressuring me to get the MMR vaccine when there's a measles outbreak? So I say, well, can my kid just get the measles vaccine? Why does he have to get measles, mumps, and rubella all at the same time? You know, the vaccine schedule today is so much more intense than it was even when I was a kid, and certainly decades prior. Why can't I just go get the M, and then the other M, and then the R? Why do I have to get them all at the same time? Is there some medical advantage to getting them all at the same time?
You know, I don't mean to sound obsequious, but that's an outstanding question. No, really.
Oh, good.
It was a question I asked. I said, what I did is I went away and I researched this. So I was an academic. That's what you do before you're going to get embroiled in this.
Oh, he's actually going to give us an answer. That's good, because you were a fucking researcher.
Oh, and you read every paper you can get your hands on that looks at the pre-licensing studies of these vaccines, and you say, is there any merit? Have the safety studies been done? Yeah. And I went through it. I wrote a 250-page report. I thought, I must be missing something. I'm not doing these scientists credit who did the safety study. There must be something I'm missing. No, I wasn't. The safety studies on the vaccine were undertaken in small populations. They were not controlled trials. They were nothing that would have passed a drug trial for the FDA. And they were done on children in mental institutions because they were expendable.
What?
I was staggered by this when I found out, like Willowbrook State School in Manhattan, in Staten Island, New York, children whose lives were at the time deemed to be, they were up for experimentation. And this is where a lot of the vaccine safety...
The British government dropped a case when prosecuting an intelligent agent because the evidence they would have to give for disclosure would have exonerated the agent.
Trials were done in children who were severely mentally and physically debilitated. And I can't believe this. This is staggeringly unethical. Yeah. On every level. There was no mention of fully informed consent whatsoever. And these children were just used as experimental subjects. Now, there's a moral issue to that, an ethical issue. There's also a practical issue, and that is one of the concerns about measles vaccines is that they cause brain injury. And measles causes brain injury. So if you're looking for evidence of brain injury in already brain-injured children, are you going to find it? Right. Can you extrapolate from those brain-injured children to a normal population of healthy children? No, you can't. But this is where the safety studies were done. And when I finished that, I became more convinced than ever that I needed to pursue this to its natural conclusion. Not that MMR causes autism. Now, why MMR? Because when they put the 3 together, did they conduct the safety studies to determine whether 1 and 3 were equal in terms of their safety profile or something quite different? Right. No, they didn't. Again, I was surprised, because if I gave you 3 antihypertensive drugs, 3 blood pressure drugs at once, it would kill you. Yeah. And it would kill everybody it's been put into. So why is it okay when you're taking 3 live viruses and putting them together in combination in a way that nature has never seen them before? Right. Why is that okay? And so I did the research, and I found precisely that there was interference between the viruses in the component in the combined vaccine. But people are just, moved on.
Interference meaning what?
Interference is that the immune response induced by the single vaccine was different from that produced by the combination, the mumps in particular interfering with the measles. So I said to the Department of Health, because I said parents might want to opt for the single vaccines at the time they were available in the UK and the US.
I would be much more likely, really on any vaccine, to say, okay, we'll give them the single one first, and then maybe in 8 months we'll give them the other one, and then 6 months, I don't know. It seems more prudent to me, more cautious.
Does it? What is the basis here for I don't know, it seems better, I guess, maybe. Is it though? If you had an autistic kid who's eating all of his food separately, and it's why do you eat all of your potatoes and then eat all of your corn and then eat all, and it's well, I don't know, I just don't want to mix the food, otherwise I just eat in a blender. It seems like it makes sense. What can we get a better basis here? You're sitting next to or across from a researcher doctor. There must be a better basis for belief here than just seems like a good idea.
And I said to my colleagues, if asked by the media, this is the position I take. Vigorously support the continued use of the single vaccine, because that's what I believed at the time. But I can't continue to endorse this vaccine that's never been tested independently for safety. Yep. What happened is in the UK, the government stopped the importation license of the MMR vaccine, the main one we used. So you could no longer get it. It was our way or the highway. And so the option for parents was taken away, even if they wanted to protect their child against measles.
Well, you're saying they stopped the importation of the single vaccine of the M? Just the M, okay, yeah. So the solution to your perfectly reasonable question was, well, now the parents won't even have the option. They have to get the triple dose if they want any vaccine at all for measles, mumps.
So then if the MMR one is not working as well, and you said particularly the mumps causes interference, and either that the mumps is interfering with the other two, or the mumps isn't working. Then shouldn't we be able to see that there's like a higher prevalence of this disease somewhere or whatever? Is that?
That's right. And what happened in the US is Merck unilaterally made the policy decision that they were going to stop making the singles or marketing the singles. It was only going to be the combination.
I hate to ask you to engage in psychobabble, but I don't hate it that much because I want to know.
Why do you think they did this? Is it going to be profit, or is it going to be demon evil people?
What were they thinking?
I don't know. I asked them, I said to the head of vaccination in the UK, why, if your objective is to protect children against measles, principally against measles, why would you take away the option of parents being able to do it with a single vaccine?
Yeah.
And she...
Just as a quick thing, this is real. I'm not making this up. Okay. I asked this the same question before and I forgot the answer. Compliance? Compliance or the ability to follow through with a treatment is considered like an essential part of the efficacy of any medical intervention. Like, it is incredibly important. Not incredibly important. It's an essential part of determining if any particular thing, actually, can you actually prescribe it to somebody? Like, how likely are they to follow the treatment regimen? Like, I'm pretty sure this isn't strictly true, but I think theoretically you could probably have the dog shit insulin from a long time ago, and it would probably be similar-ish, maybe not quite as effective as the synthetic analogs today, if you literally had the glucose test machine and the shitty insulin, and every bite of food you kept poking your blood and poking whatever, and then injecting a little bit and doing it back and forth. You could theoretically time it out to be more effective than just taking going from being hypoglycemic to hyperglycemic to going up and down your blood sugar with the shitty insulin. But nobody's realistically going to do that, right? They measure their blood sugar twice a day and then they, drag themselves full of the bullshit insulin. This is why one of the reasons why the synthetic analogs is better is because it's slow release. It works over time. The compliance is going to be better. If you have 6 different vaccines that you need to administer and you find a way to be able to do all 6 of them, by the way, even in a slightly less effective way, if you find a way to do all 6 at once, that all 6 at once is probably going to have a way higher adherence than trying to tell a parent, come back in 3 months, come back in 3 months, come back in 3 months, come back, right? That would be one reason why being able to do as much as you can in a single doctor's visit would be beneficial. But
he said, because if we did that, it would destroy our MMR program. So the concern was for the program, right, and not for the well-being of children. And I was absolutely astonished. One, that she said it. Okay. She actually admitted to it. And 2, that you would do that. So, and I said to David Salisbury, who was head of the government side of the vaccine, did you not do the safety studies to compare the single measles with the triple vaccine? And he said, no, we assumed that there would be no difference. You don't make assumptions on behalf of every vaccine. And he said, no, we assumed. Did you not do the safety studies to compare the single measles with the triple vaccine?
Is there no... So if I look for MMR vaccine safety, I don't even know how you would look up medical research like this or whatever. Two studies indicate that for every 10,000 children who get their first MMR and varicella vaccines as separate shots in their ages 12 to 23 months, about 4 will have a febrile seizure during the 7 to 10 days following vaccination. Children of the same age who get the combined measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella vaccine as their first vaccine disease are twice as likely to have a febrile seizure during the same time period. Okay, so this is comparing the MMR and varicella separately versus together. So it seems like this research exists. Studies have shown that children younger than 7 years old, there is a very small increased risk of febrile seizures approximately 6 to 14 days after MMR vaccinations. Okay, so that exists. Joint pain is associated with the rubella portion of MMR vaccine among people who do not have immunity to rubella. Joint pain and temporary arthritis happen more often after MMR vaccines in adults rather than children. Okay, so it seems like there is research on this, or... No published scientific evidence shows any benefit in separating the combination MMR vaccine into 3 individual shots. Why do we get multiple vaccines at once? Often, more than one shot will be given during the same doctor's visit, usually in separate limbs. For example, the baby might get DTaP in one arm or leg and IPV in another. Damn, that's 8 shots at once. That dude is gigavaxxed. Holy shit. Advantages. Children should be given their vaccines as quickly as possible to get them protection during the vulnerable early months of their lives. Giving several shots at the same time means fewer office visits. This saves parents time and money and can be less... Oh, wow, look at that. Scientific data shows that getting several vaccines at the same time does not cause any chronic health problems. A number of studies have been done to look at the effects of giving various combinations of vaccines, and when every new vaccine is licensed, it has been tested among the vaccines already recommended for a particular age child. The recommended vaccines have been shown to be as effective in combination as they are individually. Sometimes certain combinations of vaccines given together can cause fever and occasionally febrile seizures. These are temporary and do not cause any lasting damage based on the information. Both the advisory committee and... Okay, well, but maybe the CDC is still lying. Still... Why don't I have a lying thing for Hassan?
Vaccine. And he said, no, we assumed that there would be no difference. You don't make assumptions on behalf of every child in your country. You do not do it. They assumed that the COVID vaccine was going to be safe and made a decision on behalf of 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
Without, when they said it can be injected and it'll stay at the vaccination site. That was an assumption. They then found it went everywhere in the body, in particular, got into the brain and the ovaries and wherever else.
Oh, wait. A combined measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, MMRV vaccine is expected to facilitate universal immunization against these 4 diseases. Study was undertaken to synthesize current research findings. 24 RCTs, were including 19 RCTs compared single MMRV dose with measles, mumps, rubella vaccine with or without the varicella vaccine. So this is MMR plus VMMR. Similarly, blah, blah, blah. This looks like it's the MMR versus the MMRV. But I mean, if they did it for this one, I imagine they did it for the MMR versus the MMR separately as well, right? This is just fucking retarded.
That assumption was entirely wrong. You don't make assumptions about safety on behalf of anyone, let alone 8 billion people.
So
what a fucking
what year is this? The UK
Weasley...
decides, all right, we're going to ban the importation of the single dose. When did that happen?
This is towards the end of the 1980s. The 1990s.
Okay.
So paper came out in 98, so we're talking about the subsequent 2 years.
Okay. So they say, all right, no more. You have to get the MMR. At this point, I guess this is the time, late 90s, early 2000s.
Where the autism diagnoses are increasing.
Really starting to speak about the link. Bobby Kennedy, now the Secretary of Health and Human Services, is suggesting there's a link between vaccines and autism. As you say, your paper invited further research. It would seem to me, I guess in my innocence, that this would be a great opportunity for scientists. Wow, this is great. I could make my bones proving something really important in medicine. Does any further research happen?
We started to do a lot of research. And we published, before I left the Royal Free, it wasn't just that Lancet paper, we published 15 papers on this subject, pursuing it to its natural conclusion, but it was sabotaged and that came to an end. But I had the opportunity to go and present to the CDC. In 2001, I went to present to the Oversight Committee on Government Reform under Dan Burton, and then I went to a meeting with the CDC and they said, Dr. Wakefield, look, every kid gets MMR vaccine, some get autism, how do you explain that? Why don't they all get it? Well, that's medicine. A lot of people smoke, some people develop lung cancer. We don't know why. There are cofactors that influence your risk. But that's the way medicine works. What I said to them is, my group, and I am particularly...
If I were to look up, you're telling me there's not volumes of disease, pathways to indicate or explain why they think cigarette smoke or whatever might cause lung cancer? There's literally zero idea. I mean, I'm sure we can't say definitively 100%, but... How does smoking cause lung cancer? Lung cancer happens when cells in the lungs develop changes in their DNA. Cells' DNA holds the instructions to be gay. In healthy cells, DNA is not gay, and then it becomes gay. Instruction cells... How smoking causes lung cancer. Researchers believe smoking causes lung cancer by damaging the cells that line the lungs. Cigarette smoke is full of cancer-causing substances called carcinogens. When you inhale cigarette smoke, the carcinogens cause changes to the lung tissue almost immediately. At first, your body may be able to repair this damage with each repeated exposure. I bet there's a fuck ton of shit that's written about this. I bet there's books and books and books and books and books that literally just dive into probably even particular cancers. The idea that we would just say that we don't know how this works. It's like one of those things. This is like when somebody says, when a super educated or expert person is like, oh, we have no idea how this thing works. And you think that oh, fuck, you must have no idea how it works. I have no idea how it works. No, it's not the same thing, right? When a physicist says, oh, we don't know how gravity works. Oh, cool, me neither. I have no fucking idea. It's well, no, we can still there's Voyager 2 has left our solar system and we can launch rockets to the moon and shoot missiles with pinpoint fucking accuracy. Did the Apollo missions have to account for Jupiter? I think they did, right? That's a big ass fucking planet, and I think it affects the rest of our solar system. Like when somebody says that, when somebody says we don't know how this works, that doesn't mean that they like truly have no fucking idea at all. They're just like a child stumbling around in the dark. But
said, Dr. Wakefield, look, every kid gets MMR vaccine, some get autism. How do you explain that? Why don't they all get it? Well, that's medicine. A lot of people smoke, some people develop lung cancer. We don't know why. There are cofactors that influence your risk, but that's the way medicine works. What I said to them is, my group and I am particularly interested in patterns of exposure, unusual patterns of exposure. For example, exposure early in life. Measles, when you get it under 1, is associated with a much greater risk profile than if you get it after 1, when your immune system intuitively is more mature. So does the same pertain to the MMR? Right. If you get it younger, are you at greater risk of this adverse reaction being regressive autism than if you get it, say, 15, 20 months later? And they said the same pertains than if you get it after 1, when your immune system intuitively. Measles, when you get it under 1, is associated with a much greater risk profile than if you get it measles, when you get it under 1, is associated with a much greater risk profile than if you get it after 1, when your immune system intuitively is more mature. So does the same pertain to the MMR? Right.
What risk profile are we talking about? And does the MMR vaccine cause any of the negative side effects? I'm not even saying side effects, the actual effect of the disease of measles. Like this would be an immediately apparent and obvious thing, right?
If you get it younger, are you at greater risk of this adverse reaction being regressive?
What adverse reaction? Why not state something with a little bit more specificity? Like you're a doctor and you're a researcher. And he's not even just a clinical doctor. This is a research doctor. You should be able to speak about this with a much greater degree of specificity. But
than if you get it, say, 15, 20 months later. And they said, okay, we'll look at that. They went away, and to their credit, they did that study. And they found that it was exactly true. There was a highly significant risk of autism in those children who got the measles vaccine, the MMR vaccine, on time, 12 to 18 months, 12 to 15 months, compared with getting it later. The hypothesis turned out vaccine was a highly, we'll look at that. They went away, and than if you get it, say, 15, 20 months later. And they said, okay, we'll look at that. They went away, and to their credit, they did that study. And they found that it was exactly true. There was a highly significant risk of autism in those children who got the measles vaccine, the MMR vaccine, on time, 12 to 18 months, 12 to 15 months, compared with getting it later. The hypothesis turned out to be true.
But you mentioned earlier.
What study? Hello? Can we at least get a journal? If not a study title? Researchers? Hello? This is a research scientist. You should know the answer to this, right? What?
That you might have some of these risk factors just from getting measles, just getting the virus. So could one argue, well, it's better to get the MMR vaccine at a younger age because if they get measles below the age of 1, they're going to be right there in the same predicament.
I swear to God, if he now people will do this often. When they talk about the vaccine, they will talk about every fucking side effect under the sun to explode how many people might be negatively impacted by it. But then when they talk about the disease, they're like, oh, this disease hardly kills anyone. They only talk about death. They never talk about any of the other side effects that might happen or any of the other negative outcomes of the disease. It's only death. But he's not going to do that. That would be so stupid.
Is measles a greater risk factor for developing these symptoms than the MMR vaccine? Is there any difference between the two?
From the clinical perspective, I can say that of all the children, by the time I left the Royal Free, we'd seen 183 children with this syndrome. And in those, there were just 2 who'd had the single measles vaccine. The rest had had MMR. So it seemed to be, at least at the clinical level, an idiosyncrasy of the MMR vaccine, if there were a causal association. The other question you have to answer.
Okay. His unique. Okay.
Answer is, if yes, if the prevalence of the disease had remained constant, or had even gone down with vaccination, then it may have been that single measles, the natural measles, was more dangerous. But it had gone up exponentially. It had gone up dramatically. And so...
Wait, measles had gone up dramatically or autism? What?
The opposite seemed to be true, that this combination, given early, was a risk factor, which is what the study found. So...
also a risk factor for what? Can you name some of these... like what are these side effects that we're talking about? Are these acute things? Are these chronic conditions? Are these like really fucking bad or not that big of a deal? Like a common adverse, like you could say that there's a vaccine that produces 40% likelihood of an acute adverse reaction when a child gets a vaccine. And that vaccine injury, that I don't know if it's kind of an injury, but an adverse reaction could just be a fever. And that fever might last for 12 hours, right? Like,
we knew nothing about that. Why? Because the CDC buried it.
Oh my.
They buried it.
What does the CDC buried it mean? Like it was published in a journal and the CDC bought all the journals and then buried them in the ground? Or?
For 14 years, They put millions of American children at risk of a serious permanent neurological disease in order to protect themselves, their credibility, and the program. They destroyed documents, they altered the data, and they presented a paper that said, it's okay, it's fine, go back in the water, the vaccine is safe. And so this only came to light when Dr. William Thompson, the senior author on that study, the man who'd designed the study, collected the data, collated it, interpreted the data, called a scientist, Dr. Brian Hooker, and said, we've done a terrible thing, and I can no longer live with it. And I kept the original data, even though my colleagues destroyed it, because I knew it was foilable. I knew that it may become part of some legal proceeding. Here it is. And he handed it over. And it showed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the CDC had committed the most outrageous fraud in the context of this vaccine. And that was the thing that really convinced me that it was the cause. It wasn't my study, or even the subsequent studies. And that strengthened my...
Okay, now this is a super biased source, I would imagine. Okay, but I just Googled these, I was curious. But this is literally from a source called vaccinateyourfamily.org. So we'll take it with a grain of salt and we'll look up other stuff. So the CDC whistleblower accusation spotlighted in the film Vaxxed. In August of 2014, anti-vaccine activists Brian Hooker and Andrew Wakefield released a video of recorded phone conversations with Dr. William Thompson, a researcher at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In the recordings, Dr. Thompson claims to have evidence that the CDC altered the rules of data collection for a study in order to omit data which would have shown African-American boys had a greatly higher incidence of autism after MMR vaccination. Hooker used the raw data provided by Dr. Thompson to write and publish his own analysis. Dr. Thompson, however, has not spoken about the issue in public, releasing only a statement through his lawyer that does not address the claims he made to Hooker and Wakefield. Independent reviews of his claims have shown there's no evidence of an increase in autism cases after vaccination in African-American boys or any other subset of the population. The story. Who is Dr. William Thompson? Dr. William Thompson is a psychologist employed by the CDC. He was a co-author on a number of vaccine safety studies published by the CDC, including the study that he claims omitted a correlation between autism and vaccines. Who is Brian Hooker, and what is this associate? Brian Hooker is a biochemical engineer who has a son with autism. He believes his son's autism was caused by vaccination. Hooker concluded in his paper, the present study provides new epidemiologic evidence showing that African-American males receiving an MMR vaccine prior to 24 months of age or 36 months of age are more likely to receive an autism diagnosis. Brian Hooker used a different methodology than the CDC authors did to analyze the data. When collecting data, you must know what type of study you're conducting to ensure you collect the data correctly. Using a different methodology after the data is collected will produce unreliable results. Hey, remember that? It's similar to getting the ingredients for a cake, but then trying to make a pie. I don't know if that's the analogy that I would go with, but... Oh, who's trying to get in? Well, hello. Stop. Is there any more information about this somewhere? Vaxxed. What a great name. From cover-up to catastrophe.
Would have never done his original study, gotten that published in the Lancet, would have never created the uproar that rightfully it should have created, then the CDC would have never studied this.
The press conference for the Lancet paper was use of the M, and I said, and there had been proper...
The safety measles vaccine. Report by Dr. A.J. Wakefield, FRCS. Organizers. Does this mean that was this published, or the safety of measles vaccine? The report you're referring to is a study published. Its co-authors published a flawed study that linked autism to measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, prompting a widespread scare. While other scientific studies found no MMR in 2010 when a British medical panel In a new study, Confirmatory Bias on Health Decisions, Evidence from the MMR Controversy, economist Xin-Yi Chao, the author, and then the Arthur F. Searing Professor of Economics and earnestly Associate Professor. Listen, economists think they can fucking research anything, okay? This is what happened, all right? You have hard sciences and you have soft sciences, all right? In the soft sciences, economics is a soft science, but because these guys learn a bunch of math and they publish a bunch of Greek symbols in their papers, they're like, actually, we're a hard science. And then they're still a soft science. So they think they're better than everybody else. So they're like, we're actually going to go and we're going to do research in every other soft science field just to show how much better we are than all of you. So you'll get all these papers in psychology and criminology and everything. I guess even in medicine, these motherfuckers, and there's always these economists, okay, that run around with their little math functions. They want to fucking publish everywhere. Fuck you guys. Stay away. I'm just kidding. Or I'm not kidding about that. They do, but I think it's just because they do a lot of statistical analysis and shit. Can you find... Does anybody have that original report thing? The safety of measles vaccine. Is BMJ like British Medical Journal? Does that mean that it was published, or?
The belief that there may be...
Not you.
Lamentable. They were lamentable. Many, many assumptions have been made about the safety of this vaccine, and there had been problems which had been airbrushed. So I wrote to my colleagues and the Dean, and I said, going forward, there are...
They've started from the position the mRNA vaccine is safe, and that any change in policy following claims of adverse events must be set against that position. Their starting point was and remains wrong. Any drug, especially one that involves 3 live viruses, must be considered dangerous until proven otherwise. This has never been proven, and therefore all claims of adverse events should have been thoroughly investigated. They have failed to honor this obligation. Ooh, honor spelled with the British way. Yikes.
Are going to be questions about what parents should do next. I cannot, in due conscience, but can no longer.
2 different companies in 2 different countries, are they all in on it? And also, what is the motivation? Like, wouldn't you want to create super soldiers for your people? Why would you want to kill all your own citizens? What is the motivation for this? Can somebody help me understand? Like, explain the conspiracy. Like, we want to fuck all of our own citizens over. Like, why would you do that? Like, I would understand the conspiracy was like, measles and rubella are not actually a big deal. So when you take the MMR vaccine, it's just a bunch of saline and then just the mumps vaccine. And that's all they're doing. They're giving you a bunch of bullshit. And then they're telling you they're giving you 3 vaccines. It's bullshit. Those diseases have been eliminated. I can understand that. It's like, oh, okay, they're just like gassing, or they're inflating their profits or whatever by calling it a triple vaccine, and it's a monovalent vaccine, and it's just like saline and one. But like what? But like all the governments and all the educational institutions and all the medical companies are like, we're actually secretly killing all of our population. Like, why? Yeah, and then also, if you want to make even more money for everybody, for the doctors, for the hospitals, and for the vaccines, wouldn't you want to have 3 separate vaccines? Oh, now we can have 3 separate office visits, 3 separate appointments you have to make, 3 separate vaccines that you have to pay money for. Wouldn't you make more money doing that than combining all of it into one thing?
Be a cause, but the need for the CDC to do that really convinced me that they knew there was a problem. Now,
so ironically, you're convinced of this link between the MMR and autism, not by your own research, primarily by your own research, but by the CDC, which then sought to totally undermine your credibility.
Absolutely. And then Thompson said, this is 14 years later with all that damage done. It didn't mean at this stage still that the vaccine caused the disease in scientific terms. What it meant was the CDC had an obligation to do a bigger, better study somewhere else to see if they could replicate it, or to at least advise parents that they may wish to delay the vaccine while this issue was being resolved. But they did none of those things. They buried it and caused terrible damage in order to protect themselves and their reputations. And that I found absolutely heartbreaking. And
Wait, we can test this right now. Who makes a shampoo and conditioner? Axe shampoo. So theoretically, like the 2-in-1 should be twice as expensive as the one. I guess it's not the same because it's not twice the size. Never mind. Fuck you.
Thompson, the CDC scientist, contacted my wife, sent her and said, we could have salvaged your husband's career if we'd been honest. Well, it's irrelevant. My career is, it doesn't matter about me because the issue isn't about me. It's not about me. It's about something much more important.
Oh my God.
About all of those children out there who were exposed unknowingly to this issue when the truth was something quite different. It was really sad. And so I can live with whatever's happened to me because, as I say, I was a consenting adult. I knew what I was getting into, at least to some extent, and I could have pulled out at any stage. These children couldn't. They had no voice.
So the CDC conducts this study, proves your point, buries the study, then comes out and says the MMR is great. On what basis, if any, does the CDC say, forget about that study, that we're not going to tell you about the MMR is great?
They don't. And this is why when we made the movie Vaxxed, which took their recordings of William Thompson admitting to this, of all the original documents, this is why when we made that, which effectively accused them of the most egregious fraud, we heard nothing more. There was no pushback. If we'd said one thing that was out of line, that was false, that was defamatory, we would have been sued to the moon and
for
back.
Every penny we're worth. And
absolutely. And they said not a word. Why? Because they knew it was true. And that's where we are today. We took it to Congress. We said, you have got to have an inquiry. You've got to investigate this. They didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to touch it. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. They didn't want to touch it.
So as all this is going down, you're facing not only soft pressure and reprisals, but they took away your medical license. How did that happen? Where does that stand now? Why haven't you sued them into the ground and gotten your medical license back?
Well, you could say, why would I want to be part of that villainous crowd?
Yeah, fair enough.
I really want to do that. Now I'm a filmmaker. I write and make films. That was in England. I now live in Austin, Texas, and it was. I could dwell on that. I could go back and use whatever resources I have left in the world.
Well, you did. He did do 2 court cases, right?
To try and restore my credibility, my standing in the world. I don't care. It's not important. If I have a limited amount of time left on this planet, I'm not going to indulge it trying to exonerate Andy Wakefield or have his name, have the media reverse that, but they're not going to do that. I don't care. It isn't important. There is something far more important. And that, of course, is the position. It hasn't gone away. You've got to ask yourself, why is it being talked about now more than ever, particularly with Bobby Kennedy in the White House? Things have changed dramatically. And this is because of not only the truth of the parents' original story that is borne out, but because a few people have stood by those parents and continued to research this to its natural conclusion, including Bobby Kennedy.
Now, what was the justification for not just going after you for some study, but for revoking your medical license?
Well, for example, I'll give you some examples. We conducted unethical research on developmentally compromised children without the appropriate approval from an ethics committee. So we were alleged to have conducted unethical research. No, we didn't. Firstly, it was clinical investigation. It was merited clinical investigation based not on my opinion, based upon the opinion of one of the world's leading pediatric gastroenterologists and his team of clinicians, who then discovered a new inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, so you're having a journalist, sort of hack journalist, saying it's not ethical, when Professor Walker-Smith, in testimony, says it absolutely was ethical. This
guy tried to sue them in a Texas court. What the fuck? The libel action filed in Texas by Andrew Wakefield against the BMJ, its editor-in-chief, Fiona Godley, and the investigative journalist Brian Deere had been thrown out before it reached first base. In a 1-paragraph order, the Travis County District Judge, he didn't even sue him in federal court. He sued them in a state court in Texas. Judge Amy Clark Meekum ruled that the case could not go ahead because the Texas courts had no jurisdiction over the 3 British defendants. Okay.
This investigation needed to be done on clinical grounds. Didn't matter. To the General Medical Council panel, we were guilty of experimenting on children. So they'd made their minds up before we ever went into that room.
And there's an irony, as you mentioned earlier, that the safety studies on the vaccines conducted by the powers that be were conducted on vulnerable children. Seemed rather unethical to me when they were doing it.
It would have been unethical of us not to do it.
Oh my God.
Absolutely unethical of us not to do it. We did it. We found that the parents were right. The children had a disease which we could then treat. But no, they held that we were experimenting on vulnerable children. it was beyond belief.
Like, why don't the greedy big pharma companies want to come out and steal your cure for autism? How much money would there be in a pharmaceutical company coming out, especially when they've diagnosed so many kids with autism now, right? How much money would there be to cure it? This is retarded. Okay. Well, this was good. Okay. They're all in agreement not to do it. True. I'm supposed to go do shit soon. Nick, shave, dress. What herbal remedy do you recommend to cure my autism? Alcohol and weed helps, but I think I need something stronger. Jungle, Maine, baby. And then get an EGF. Okay, Nick, shave, dress, pocket, tidy, brush, smart, key, touch, shower, palm, sharp, pinch, mile, neat, and birth. Things you can do to hair: shave, brush. Okay, I don't know. Oh, tidy, sharp, neat. Wait, what the fuck? Okay, stealing things. You can nick something, you can pocket it, you can palm it. Pinch it. I don't think I've ever heard pinch something, but okay, got it. Things that you do to get ready: brush, shower, shave, tidy up. Oh, dress, get dressed. Oh, and then this guy's, wait, sharp, smart, no, touch, tidy, birth, mile, key, touch, smart, sharp. Tidy, neat, sharp, and smart. Things that you say that are nice to somebody. Oh my God. Oh, dapper. Okay, yeah, close enough. Oh, stones. Birthstone, keystone, milestone, and touchstone. Whatever. Okay. All right, I love you. Be careful. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't die. Lacey ordered a car exhaust. Wait, what was this? Oh. Cyber Vegan does a thing for anything else where we have like a whole list of like the stories of the day or whatever bullshit, or of the week. If somebody wants to do this for me for like media related stuff, if this is something you think you can do, so like having like links and stories or whatever bullshit, and you want to have a conversation about that, email me, okay? contact@destiny.gg if you think you can do this.
This is what you supported. You said you wanted Trump. Listen, bro, the reason I wanted Trump was because I wanted to make more money, all right? That's why. I'm gonna say it. At least I'm honest. I don't give a fuck. At least I'm not sitting here lying. I don't give a fuck who's the president. I want to make more money. I'm a greedy bitch, okay? At least I'm saying it. I've been saying it from day one. Now tell me why I ordered an $8,000 exhaust. And then a week after I order it, I get a call. You got to pay a 57% tariff on it.
Damn.
What? I got to pay an extra over $3,000 when I already paid $8,000 on a fucking tariff. I don't even know what a fucking tariff is.
$8,000 exhaust. That sounds hella expensive. Am I crazy? How much is a aftermarket exhaust for even like the exhaust manifold back? How much is that normally? That inflation is hitting hard. Probably for a supercar? Oh, I guess maybe for some crazy shit. All right.